All right, what is going on, guys? It is time for another episode of the Chasing Waypoints podcast. And, well, we've got a special one today. The 2023 Dakar Rally went off over the last couple of weeks, if you guys noticed. May not know, it's a little rally, right? Kind of unknown. Nobody really knows this mysterious 5,300-mile rally that competitors line up for every year, December 31st, January 1st. So, we are back. You guys already read the title. You know what's going to happen on this episode. We are back with the InBevLac interviews, and none other than, this time around, wearing the number 105, Mo Hart. So, we're going to go a little bit out of order here on these episodes, but the game plan is that it's a special number for these guys, and we want to make sure we capture that episode number and coincide it with what their adventure was. So, I'm looking forward to chatting with Mo here in just a minute. But man, we got a lot going on. It's our turn. Sonora Rally coming up. Baja Rally in the future. Kota Rally as well. So we've got a lot of stuff. It is the North American turn for the rally stuff, including the Sonora Rally, which is now a World Rally Raid Championship round. So be looking forward to checking that out in person, hanging out with all the teams down there, and just seeing what we see. So with that being said, guys, let's get to it and see if our guy Mo is on the line.
Can you hear me, Victor?
Yes, sir. Loud and clear.
Nice.
Yeah. Okay. I do like this better than the phone.
Yeah. Fair enough.
Okay. So, how many hours have you slept already?
Well, re-entering the North American stratosphere. Definitely keeping some odd hours, but been taking some 12-hour naps twice a day. You know, it's been pretty real. I mean, there's definitely some recovery process. The flight home might have been the hardest part, just to throw a huge wrench in it. But it's a long one home. You know, it's 15, 16-hour flight, and a lot of legends on the flight. I had AJ Jones and Seth Quintero, and AJ's dad was on the flight. So little rally crew, flew to Doha with Andrew Short and the Gazoo Racing principal and the team principal for South Racing, and it's just fun to chat with all those guys. You know, they all look at you and just think you're so crazy for doing what you just did on a bike.
Yeah, I could definitely see that. I think in Baja Racing, for the fans that listen that know more of the scoring or something, this is like Class 11 stuff. But you're on I mean, you're still on a fast bike, but literally it's like everybody looks at the Malamoto guys like, you're crazy.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that weather didn't help anything. And I think the distance this year was, you know, it's worth fact checking, but I think we got to the rest day this year and we had done all the mileage or distant kilometers of the year prior. And we were, you know, still, I don't know, 5 or 6 stages to go. And, everybody was talking about last year, you know, oh, we were in at one every day and having waffles and da-da-da-da-da-da. And I just think they just threw some serious sadistic scenarios at the racers this year. Clearly, you know, it was a true test. I can say that with clarity. It was a true test. You know, it's crazy going to the race as opposed to being at home and staying up all night watching it, because, you know, I don't even know who did well. Like, I'm watching recaps right now. I'm only on stage 4 or stage 5, and I'm watching the highlights of the stage where the cars didn't have our tracks to navigate, and it just makes me laugh. I mean, those guys, I'm sure those navigators are making a lot of money, and I don't want to say all of them, but it's pretty hard to watch. They don't even know how to get through the desert.
Oh man, everybody! There was a video that the Dakar posted. I'm like, oh, they took shots at the cars.
Yeah,
for that one.
I think I was literally just watching it 20 minutes ago, and I was laughing so hard.
I mean, it's true. I mean, it's the importance of tracks. But yeah, now once you get out there, the only thing that I think is kind of crazy, and I'd seen it happen before, kind of jump around, but last year, one of the complaints was when they flipped the stages and the bikes had to go out on the car side, that the route was pretty gnarly. That was my whole race. I'm so slow that my whole race was that description. I mean, I got tangled up. I don't know. I got off to a real slow start. I went riding with Colton Udall behind his house before I left on a 2-stroke, and one of my other buddies, Rue, and ran into a couple rocks and kind of did my wrists in. And I was like, I can't believe I've already just
I mean, there was a week there where I was like, do I even get on the plane? And so
Oh, wow.
I got to Dakar and, just kind of was nursing my wrists, and I felt good enough to get on the plane, did the prologue,
Mm-hmm.
got last, and I'm like, okay, this is interesting, right? And then last in the first stage, and what that looks like is getting caught by the, Nasser and Sebastian Loeb, like 100 kilometers into close to a 400 and something kilometer stage.
Mm-hmm.
And it's fine when one of those cars comes through, like you can use that line. But by the time the side-by-side, the cars, the side-by-sides, and the garbage trucks come through, I basically couldn't ride in that main line. I mean, I had to make my own line out to the side, and that's super slow. And it's a tough lesson to learn, because if you're in the line and the pass alert goes off, you have to get out of the line. Well, by the time the rain and the rocks and the garbage trucks make the 4-foot rut, like, it can be really hard to get out of that line. And so that's slow too. So it just turned into a sufferfest for sure. And, it's one of those things, like, you show up in the original by Motul bivouac, and you've got competitors around you, and they kind of look at you and they're like, first time? And I'm like, yeah, first time. And the guy is from Romania, and he's like, yeah, I've done 19 Red Bull Romaniacs and 13 Dakars and finished 10. And I'm like, yeah, here we go. And the next guy over is Cyril Dupree's mechanic. His name is Benji Merlot, French national living in Dubai, and just surrounded by legends, and I'm feeling pretty out of place. And the first 2 days in the rocks were just vicious. But the whole time I'm like, this is, the bikers last year or the year before, I can't remember what year, were asking for the stage to be canceled because of the conditions. And I basically had to suffer through those conditions almost every day. It was brutal. It was totally brutal.
I think in that sense, I mean, I remember, and I think that's the quote that Daniel Sanders will go down in history for calling everybody princesses for requesting that the stage be canceled because it was too rough.
Yeah. Well, no, the difference is nobody listens to me. but yeah.
No, but still, I mean, like, how, so, I mean, you've ran some of the Nevada days. I mean, you've ridden a lot in Southern California and Baja California.
Oh, yeah.
When you say rough, how do they compare? Is there even a comparison?
There isn't. There isn't. Those, I feel like we do some riding in Baja, and you get tangled up in an old score course, and you're like, wow, this kind of sucks. Well, I mean, imagine there's like, I mean, they just don't race garbage trucks in Baja, right? So, like, the trophy trucks do plenty of damage, but this is next level. I don't, and if I don't know how many bikes race score these days, but let's say it's less than 30, and I think I'm being,
generous. Yeah.
Generous. I mean, we're talking about 137 bikes and quads, so I've got that in front of me. Usually it seemed like, and then the cars come through, and there's plenty of those. And then the side-by-sides come through. There's plenty of those. And then the garbage trucks come through, and that's when it's time to get out of that line. There's nothing like, it was a rough introduction for me. Like, you'd hear an alert on the organization's device, and you're like, well, what does that one mean? And the first time you get a truck alert, it's different than a car alert. I think maybe it goes by weight. So, like, you think your bike's on fire. Like, what's that alert? And next thing you know, you hear a twin diesel turbo spooling up behind you, and you're just like, oh my God, it's a garbage truck. And it's the loudest thing you can hear. And some of those guys, not to spook you, but they like play music instead of blowing a horn, so that at least you know which side they're trying to get by you on.
Mm-hmm.
But those trucks are scary. I think I mentioned in our previous podcast that I'm scared of trophy trucks. Well, like, those garbage trucks are next level, and I just don't really have the ability or the speed to stay in front of them. I think most of the guys on the team and everything else could more or less stay in front of the cars, but I was really tangled up in the cheap seats. I mean, there's nosebleeds, and then there's cheap seats, and wow, I mean, what an experience. Those those trucks make some crazy noises. And then there's ones powered by hydrogen and they sound different, but yeah, crash course and what the alerts are off the literally.
Not necessarily the way you want to find out about it and the alerts. No, you got to be playing with it in the bivouac, but
well, I knew what the car alert was, I'm like, okay, that means it's move over, be careful, and then there's this new alert. And I have to say that the pass alert option is amazing. Like there's clearly some algorithm where it knows closing speed from the vehicle behind to the vehicle in front. And if you're just 100 meters or 50 meters out of the line of the overtaking vehicle, like the pass alert doesn't go off. And if I'm going less than 5 something kilometers an hour, they don't get an alert, they get a rider down alert. So there's some math there, I have to give credit to whoever's doing that because it seemed to work really well. And Bill Conger had mentioned that to me in a dinner months back, and I now understand what he's saying. Like somebody's fine-tuned that thing to the point where it's not just broadly annoying all the time. Like it works really well. It seems pretty safe. I was zigzagging back and forth across the main line sometimes to cut corners and cut some distance, and that's when it can get a little scary. And sometimes it wouldn't pick up the second car. So like if a side-by-side blew through and there was one just not nerfing it, but trying to stay out of the dust and that close, like I would go to cut across and there'd be another side-by-side there and I wouldn't be getting an alert. So like you still had to be heads up, and that's on me for sure. But it was interesting to say the least.
Yeah, I could see where that would be some difficult math, but I think that's really cool because I remember some time ago hearing, I believe it was one of the incidents with Robbie Gordon when he was out there and talking about pass alerts and the safety side of it, and the closing speed that, if you issue a pass alert and you're on it and that person jackrabbits, they literally were safe where they were. And then all of a sudden they're not safe where they're going because they jackrabbited thinking that the car was directly behind them when it was actually on their left side, which is the side they decided to pick, to get out of the way.
Well, I'm curious if you're talking about Score or Dakar, because I don't think the cars can push a button. I just think it's an automatic notification. I could be wrong, but I feel like, the pass alert would go off and I would make a motion with my foot or instantly just, if I was to the right of the main line, I would just keep drifting right out of the main line. And the first 2 days were in the rocks, 2.5 days were in the rocks. So there was nothing wrong with stepping out of the main line a little bit extra when those guys went by, because you could get knocked out by a rock. I mean, like I actually saw how these cars get punctures. I mean, when they're hitting these rocks and the rocks disintegrate like a snowball hitting a brick wall, like they would be pulled over in the next kilometer changing a tire.
Oh, wow.
And I was talking to the Toyota Gazoo principal about it on the plane. He's like, yeah, maybe we should put a camera on you and, because we're trying to figure out how to avoid all this stuff. But I don't know what the point of that was, but yeah, I mean, those rocks flying around, like especially those cars are so loose. I mean, those guys can drive, they can drive well, but they don't necessarily give you any, they're not going easy on anybody. So it's up to me to move out of the line and not get hit by a rock. Or get sprayed by a rock. And you learn that as Score racing, right? Like you never stand on the outside of a turn or spectate on the outside of a turn or park on the outside of a turn. Like your windows won't be there. The rocks flying are serious. And those 4-wheel drive, everything that's down there, they kick out for sure.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it's like a snowball machine. It's like a pitching machine, more like it.
Exactly. Yeah.
So that's an interesting... So for the first, we saw the highlight reels and we saw all of that stuff. The conspiracy theory is that you guys weren't even in Saudi Arabia. At least that's mine, because we
were underwater. We were in Atlantis.
Yeah. Well, yeah, that was for a country or an area that gets rain 3 days a year to get rain 4 or 5 days, I think it was. And then the landscapes, I'm like, are they even in Saudi Arabia? Like all the rocks and the mountains.
It was crazy, and you talk to some of the boys on how to get ready for this race, and they're like, yeah, just go practice long, fast, sandy tracks, Well, they basically turned the first, 2 to 4 stages into a squid filter. They were trying to get rid of people, and it was difficult. And those rocks were something that, is basically on my learn how to deal with board. I mean, like I remember my first Sonora rally, I came back on, okay, I need to sort the dunes out. And I've come back from this rally thinking I knew how to ride in sand and thinking I knew how to ride a bike, and I really don't, but like I basically have to put rocks back on the drawing board. And I also need to say that some of that sand in the end was some of the softest stuff you can imagine. I don't even know where you go to train for that, but that's a whole nother skill level. I mean, you'd be on flat land, let the clutch out and just go down to the hub, and burning through double the gas, just total fuel consumption and really difficult. I mean, you didn't know what was hard and what was soft, and you'd be going, you'd sink, and you'd go, and you'd sink, and then it'd hook up, and then it'd sink. And
oh, wow.
Yeah, it was, I'm jumping all over the place, but yeah, it rained a lot. And when you're racing Malimoto or original bimotool class in a tent, like that variable is, you just can't write some of that stuff. You just can't even, you're under some tent that the OBM guy set up for you, which is awesome to work on your bike. And then the canopy needs to drain water, and it goes straight into your Malimoto box. And just gallons of water. And you're like, okay, all my oil filters are wet. Like everything's soaked. Like, it just never ended. It was, you couldn't really charge anything in the rain, or you had to be smart about how to do it and hide out in one of the semis or go find an electrical plug somewhere. And, the rain gear was critical. I mean, it wasn't necessarily the racing that was hard. It's the whole package. It's surviving the camping, it's surviving the bike work, and it was surviving the liaisons. The Saudi drivers are absolutely insane. You're under a speed limit on the road, and all they want to do is race you, take videos of you, and while they're doing that, they're driving you off the road, and it's raining, and we ended up on a lot of tar seal for some reason that didn't have stripes. So like when it's raining hard and you're on your stock RFR headlight and you're trying to just survive and get home and it's pitch dark, and like the surviving the liaisons is
an art form.
Absolutely, like a sticker of achievement. Like you deserve a little medal for surviving liaisons. I mean, Paul had gone down in a liaison. A guy from South Africa named Stuart Gregory totally ate it on a liaison. Like the semis had made those essentially sunken valleys from their weight, and he was doing a transfer across a lane in rain to get onto an off ramp, and just something went wrong in the crown and he went down. And I mean, that kind of stuff is so sketchy. And I got caught. They shortened the stage because of weather, and the directions were, just head back towards, I'd be lying if I could remember the name of the city. But just head that way. You'll see the bivouac. And I'm like, okay, like no road book, no nothing. Well, I missed the turn. There was no bivouac to see. And I ended up in downtown wherever. And it was flash flooding. Like when I you couldn't see the curves because the water was so high. I'd put my boot on the ground and I'd be up to my knee in water. Like the water was literally over my 21-inch front wheel.
Holy hell.
And you're fighting a 4-way stop with no working traffic lights. And I've missed the bivouac and I'm lost and I'm freezing. Just totally questioning everything I've decided to do. And, I ended up going to some firehouse and, like a fireman station, and those guys and I had some dates and some coffee, and in my terrible Muslim, accent somehow figured out where the airport was, and they turned me loose. And, by the time I get back to the bivouac after something like that, they're already packing up to move for the next day, and I still have to work on my bike. And I'm like, can you not put my box away yet? Like, I need some time. And they're like, yeah, of course, But getting it, I mean, I was just on the back foot from the beginning with everything, timing wise. I mean, I'd get to the starting control, and by the time I would start, they'd be breaking the whole thing down. Like, I'm like, can you guys just wait 2 minutes? It's a little demoralizing. You know, I mean, I wouldn't say that, but I mean, it was just
it was in the thoughts for sure.
Yeah, I mean, my experience is probably just so different from you know, all the boys who finished well, and you know, I got to see a cool part of the race. I mean, I always got to see the leaders come through. I always got to see the helicopters, and you know, those trucks sound so wicked. They sound like F1 cars in the dunes, and
that's crazy.
Yeah, my experience is probably very different than most of the real riders. But.
Well, I mean, yeah, but either way, I mean, you did it the long way. It was hard fought, but you made it to the line, and that was only a handful of people have that.
Yeah, I guess Kyle McCoy, our team historian, has updated the spreadsheet, so there's only 37 Americans who have finished Dakar before. And I started to think about it last night, and I looked it up before we talked, and I was like, I wonder if the 4 Americans finishing this year was a new record for bikes. And in the end, it wasn't. There was a year where 5 guys did it. I'm pretty sure it was a Chris Blaze year, like 2003, when he got third. 5 Americans finished in the bike class, and then there's a handful of other years where 4 Americans finished. But started off with the best of intentions with 11 of us. I mean, yeah,
nice, dude. That I can only imagine the feeling, getting to the end. And I got to say, I saw the video. I think it was Bill that recorded that video. And considering you had just done 5,300 miles in 15 days. Well, yeah. 5,300 miles, what the organization said. The odometer on the bike might be different, but you look pretty fresh for that.
I didn't go fast enough to hurt myself, that's for sure. I mean, I was out there a lot longer than everybody else, but I was thinking about that too. I mean, would you rather have an RFR with Toby Price's hours on it or an RFR with my hours on it? I don't think I was too hard on that machine, and it made it to the end. I feel really lucky that I got a good bike, and that's all that stuff's just such a huge part of it. It's so many pieces to the puzzle. And the thing about that finish line is, not the podium, but the actual finish line. I mean, I got in pretty late on stage 13 as usual. And, some things started firing up, and Dan Bartolucci sent me a text. He's like, he was easing me into it. So I was sure, but he basically notified me that it was a reverse start for the next day. And I was like, oh, okay. So it's pissing down rain. And I talked to Bill Conger, and the Dakar Classics ran that track for stage 13. So he's telling me how greasy it was. And he's telling me that as it's raining like an inch an hour. I'm like, oh.
Oh, okay.
Okay. So because it's a reverse start, I'm like, I think I'm going to end up starting first. Well, I guess I didn't finish dead last in stage 13. And they started us 5 wide, 2 minutes apart, possibly. Mm-hmm. And I was in the second wave of 5. And, I was probably pretty strung out. Like Jim's entourage and Jim were with me for dinner for stage 13, after stage 13. And I was probably an anxiety mess. I was pretty stressed out. I was like, oh, I don't want to lead out in the mud and all that stuff. But in the end, I got to watch the whole class come through, the bike class come through, and, watching Toby and Kevin and Skylar just ripping at the end. Like, they all kind of passed me in the last 6 to 8 kilometers. And our bikes were super muddy. I think our number plates were super marred up. So when I got to the finish line, they all thought, the news crew and the media team, they all actually thought I was somebody important. And they came over, like everybody rushed over, all the cameras, everything else. And I'm like, oh, what? And they wiped the mud off my number, and they all kind of looked at each other, and they all just walked away. And I was like, oh, okay. And,
dicks.
And you know what? I mean, it was fine. It was just funny. Like, I was like, that's pretty much how it should be. But one of the highlights of that race for me, and one of the most important moments, was, Skylar took a second to walk away from celebrating with his 2 teammates and came over and put his arm around me and said, "Good job," and he was the first person to, outside of the finishing team of the organization, but he was, the first person to give me an attaboy. And it's just something I'll never forget. He was in the middle of, actually, celebrating getting third place at Dakar, which to me, that is his best result. I'm pretty sure he's got a third, fifth, and a ninth. Mm-hmm. And, he walked over and said, "Nice one." And it's the things like that are important, and the memories that I'll never forget. So thanks to Skylar for that.
Yeah. Yeah, that's awesome. I mean, and I, again, the sense of accomplishment and being able to finish a rally like that and knowing, that it was all long, hard days, right? There wasn't an easy day in there.
The thing about that organization is like when you think they're being nice and they're giving you a 117 kilometer timed stage, mm-hmm. There's going to be nothing easy about it. It's going to take just as long as the 400 kilometer time stage. I mean,
you should be worried.
You should be worried. Yeah, you should. It's no cakewalk, right? And so you're going into the dunes. You're going to cook like a chicken. You're going to pick up your bike 50 times. You're going to get all sweaty, and then you're going to get on the road and you're going to ride 500 kilometers like into a rainstorm and freeze to death because you're all sweaty, And so then you got to make sure you're carrying your rain jacket and your shells and your this and that. And I mean, just the whole package is, I don't even have words for it. I mean, I think, talking to veterans and people who've been there and stuff like this, South America was harder, like altitude, and some of those transfers could have been double the length of ours in South America, through the Andes and this and that. And I'm glad I missed all of that, but this was hard. And I finished stage 2 and McCoy came over to give me some positive, just keep me going, I guess. And he's like, Kevin Bevanitas said that was the hardest stage in Saudi yet. And I was like, don't tease me. I'm like, is every day like this? Because I mean, 2 stages in, you're like, this is just vicious. Right. Mm-hmm. And Kyle's like, I don't ever remember it being like this. And, he finished in 2020 and I was like, okay. And it did once we got away from the rocks, I started having, for me personally, more success. Like I started getting in and right before the trucks, and I started getting in before the sun went down, at least finishing the stage before the sun went down. And like, those were goals. Like I'm like, this has to change. I can't get in it. I can't be finishing these stages in the dark. I mean, stage 1 finishing in the dark, the last 10 kilometers of dunes was like, an experience that I don't know how many people have, like cresting huge dunes with a stock RFR headlight, trying to do HP mm-hmm. is something that I don't recommend. And stage 2, we finished going down these huge face dunes, like step downs all the way down to the valley floor. And the note's like, yeah, you're going down and you're going down a big dune face. And the moon was out and I could see the main line where the garbage trucks were and the cars had gone through. And I was stepped out like 100 meters. Like, I didn't want to get run over. I didn't want to be there and try to get out of that rut. And the biggest like down at Sonora you can picture, if for those of you who've raced it, like the biggest drop down with the big G out at the bottom. Like we did 5, 6, 7 of those in a row to finish the stage. And I did it in the pitch dark. And so when you're cresting those bastards, like on a stock RFR headlight, like you're pretty committed. Like you get up onto the peak and obviously you don't want to come up a little short. So you get the weight mostly forward and then you realize you can go down it. And then there's all this camel grass and bushes and you don't know if there's a big rut at the bottom. And I mean, I can't tell you how lucky I am just to have gotten through some of that stuff in the dark. And
I'm just thinking it's an ocean. You get to the top and you can't see the bottom.
Yeah, there's a lot of that. It was, I mean, I'm starting to think my eyes are going bad too. I had some pretty bad depth perception issues at high noon in the dunes. Somewhere towards the end, like the sand was so soft and clean and pristine from the wind and the empty quarter that like the definition was just gone. And I got in and I talked to some of the other guys and I wasn't the only one, but it made it hard to kind of do your own line because you needed the turmoil from the tracks to basically judge your depth perception. And for me, that was a little slow. Like I was definitely doing a lot better outside the main line based on how many tracks were there and for safety as well. But it was dangerous, you know. I mean, I probably set off my airbag 3 times during the event. One was at a G out at the bottom of one of those big dune drops. Like I just basically seat bounced so hard at the bottom, my airbag went off and blew the hose off my Camelback and all that stuff. And when you're talking about these airbags, you have to think about the jacket expanding, and you know, you don't want to be carrying a screwdriver in your pocket. You could literally kill yourself. And
something I would never have thought of.
Yeah, little things, right? And then another one, I washed out into a huge bowl. The landing was like a really steep ski slope, so I didn't get hurt or anything, but my airbag went off. And it went off another time. I think I fell backwards off a dune climb, and it just went off. But that airbag works really well. It looks like Alpine Stars is making it available for North America, for everybody else, for consumers. And I'm a fan. You know, I got to update my firmware in it, and I just think it gets better and better and better. But it does work. You know, I can say that.
Yeah. I'm thinking of investing in one, because I mean, obviously it is an investment. But yeah, there was actually some chatter about that early, a couple of days ago in one of the Rally Raid groups or one of the riding groups. And that was specifically brought up because before the Dakar started, everybody was like, oh yeah, airbags. But they didn't understand that the airbags were programmed differently for this type of racing versus what you would buy for road going.
I mean, we basically had to reach out to the assistant to the director of Alpine Stars in Italy to get on the secret list to get one. You know, like we had to submit our passport details, our names, if we were doing the race. And so it was basically unobtainium unless you were going to Dakar, at least this rally version, this off-road rally version. And I feel like they literally just posted it within the past week that they're gonna make it available. And it is very different than the road one, and the algorithm is different. And I'm pretty sure this one can sense if you're ass over tea kettle, and it'll go off. And it's tricky because if you're trying to hump your bike over a dune and chest bounce the nav tower just to give you that further inch forward, you can set it off that way too. But yeah, and each cartridge I think is roughly like $72. And we would get to gas stops and they would look at your lights, and if you had a deployment, they would expect you to change a cartridge, and these cartridges aren't light. So I was, after a couple of days, I started carrying 2 on the bike, and placement of them is critical. Access to them, easy access is critical. And I chose to put them on my nav tower, and it's probably the last place you want to put that kind of weight. But that's where I had them, just on zip ties, and I could pull them out and swap them out real quick.
That's what I was going to say. Are they pretty hard to swap out?
No, super easy. I mean, once you do it, it's easy. I mean, the thing about the airbag, at least Malimoto for me, and being as green as it gets, is, like keeping up with everything you have to do is just the trick. I mean, that's how you keep moving forward. So because my first 2 days were so insanely long and stuff, I wasn't recharging my airbag, and I got to morning. I'm losing track of everything, right? But we were starting in the pissing rain, and I think it was either stage 3 or stage 4. And I go to zip on my airbag and check my lights, and they're flat, and I'm like, oh no. So I plugged in my airbag for 20, 25 minutes while I went to breakfast, and just to try to get the lights to work enough, just so I could get through technical scrutineering to start the stage, because they would check your airbag lights every morning before you left, like fully charged. They check you for water, and they check that your helmet strap is done up. And I was like, this is how you get eliminated out of the rally.
Yeah, on something so simple.
It's very simple, but I mean, just to overlook, another thing to screw up. And yeah, I gotta be careful if my stepmother listens to this podcast, because it's not very safe to go into a stage with a flat airbag, right? But I basically 20 minutes of charging wasn't enough. And because it was raining and because we had some ridiculous liaison, like, I don't even know, but it was over 300 kilometers, if not 500 kilometers. And I had every piece of clothing on possible. So I'd become friendly with the lady who checked the lights, and, she checked me the first 2 or 3 days, and, had always done it right every day. And when I had all my rain gear on and every piece of clothing I could wear to get to the start of the special, she was just like, "You good? Your lights on?" I'm like, yeah, my lights are on. And I was like, wow, did I dodge a bullet on that one? I mean, I don't even know. Like, I don't think they could let you leave, you'd probably have to sit there until it charged, and then you'd miss your
start
timing window and da-da-da-da-da. And so,
this cascading effect.
Oh, it's just the huge curve of compounding errors. You can just start rolling downhill so fast. And I feel lucky to have gotten through that one. And, because my airbag wasn't charged that day, and it never went off, and it probably saved me some money, but that's not the point.
Yeah, no, for sure. But, the other thing is that, there is a level of, you never know. Right.
Yeah.
But then there is a level of that you can control. It's like, hey, well, I don't have an airbag on. And, well, this is, like the first year running them. And we've, I've always made riding decisions based on my ability and how I'm doing. But, maybe you're a little more extra careful that day or whatever it is. I mean, the airbag doesn't stop stupidity either. So.
No, it does not.
Yeah. If you're relying on the airbag to go out and be stupid and then say, oh, I got an airbag that's going to have it, you got another thing coming. So, I'm not necessarily worried that was your scenario. I know.
No, it's good. When I ride the hard enduro stuff on my 2-stroke for training and, all that stuff, I basically have the Alpine Stars version of the airbag with no airbags. So the Alpine Star airbag vest has a ton of armor on it. You're still protected. It just doesn't inflate. Mm-hmm. And I train with basically the non-smart equivalent of that airbag, and it's fine. You're protected. You're just not super protected.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and that's, and again, and it's all still about riding smart. So let's, that was something that I was curious about, right? Because you guys, I know you were running climb gear, the bike. I mean, there's a bunch of like little things that went into this. So
the most important thing that just comes to the top of my head right now is the Climb Forecast gear, which is essentially their easily deployable rain shells, pants, and jacket. Mm-hmm. I will, till the end of my life, pay full retail for that stuff when this stuff dies. Like, it is, you just have to have it. And it works so well, and it's so light, and it gets so compact that you can carry it every day. And it's not just some garbage bag, it's like, it's a real rain shell, and it's real pants. I also was going against the grain a little bit. Like, they wanted to put holes in my rain jacket to put a bib on the back of it. And I was like, no, I'm good. Like, I don't want holes in my rain jacket. And so I would start these stages with a rain shell on for a transfer with no bib on, which is against the rules. And they kind of just looked the other way. And I wasn't the only one, but, this, like Kyle and Paul, and they had put press-on race numbers onto the back of their shell. And I would do that next time, but I was really afraid to put holes in my rain gear for a snap, for a bib. Mm-hmm. I'm kind of getting off track there, but I mean, that climb gear was really good, and Alpine Stars did boots for us, and, can't thank them enough. There's no real sponsorship on the airbags. Like, we were on our own for that.
Yeah.
But, the Climb gloves, they're the only company I know of that makes 3XL gloves, and they're the only ones that don't put my fingers to sleep. So I'm super thankful for them. My helmet was awesome. I didn't really tend to run the Climb Dakar gear. I ran the Mojave gear. And it worked better for me. I mean, the jersey vents better. With the airbag, for me, I cook a little bit. I cook like a chicken in the airbag. And so the vented jersey was key for me. And I had lost a little bit of weight before the race, just riding hard all year. And so I asked for a size down in pants. And when they showed up, I was surprised. They were over the boot pants, and I'd never really worn those before. But since they were the right size, I ran them. And in the sand, it was helpful. Like I probably, instead of taking 20 pounds of sand out of each boot at the end of the day, I'd only take out a pound. And, I don't think a ton of people were wearing over the boot pants, but in the dunes and in the sand, I actually thought it was okay. I think I'd do it again, actually, if I could do it at Sonora. But.
Yeah, that's what I was going to. So cool. So, I mean, we talked about it in the previous shows and leading up to the Dakar, and it was a couple of times that came up, right? Is getting the right gear and getting everything dialed in. And I know what you mean about the gloves, the seam pressing up on the fingertips.
Yeah. Well, for me, it's the valley between the thumb and the index finger. When that gets tight, it pulls so hard on the fingertip of the index finger that it puts my fingers to sleep. Mm-hmm. So, for me, it's critical. And they only make 3XL gloves and kind of their more serious gloves. Like they don't make it in any of the lightweight gloves. Mm-hmm. So my gloves, I'll send you a picture of what they look like when it rains, but they kind of bled to death and my hands would turn all gnarly. And, but they worked. They got me to the end. And yeah, my gear setup was good. I feel like we did enough riding leading up to this that I was pretty dialed. The one thing that was critical for me, we kept trying to get some gear out of climb on the snowmobile side of things, and there was definitely some supply chain issues and everything else. But I ended up bringing my Dionysi Gore-Tex winter gloves, and I spent a lot of money on those things a couple years ago. Mm-hmm. And those things were essential. And so not only did I have my climb riding gloves, but I had like my Liaison winter gloves, and I would not go back without those. I mean, I had a little incident one night where I went to get gas, and I had the gloves stuffed in my rally tower, one on each side. And when I got back from gas, there was only one there. And I don't want to say I freaked out, but I freaked out. And I went back to look for the other one. I mean, we're only 2 or 3 days into the race, and I know I need those gloves. And anyway, I retraced my steps in the mud in the rain, and I couldn't find it. I couldn't find them anywhere, the other one. And a couple days later, they were sitting by somebody's box, both of them. And I just picked them up, and I was so happy. I was like, oh, so thankful. I was like, I need these. And I used them after that. I for sure used them. And the other thing that's tricky is, you do these liaisons, mm-hmm. and you're given a cold weather bag. And what that means is when you get to the start of the special, you take your little satchel and you put in all your cold weather gear, and that bag goes back to the bivouac, and you retrieve it at night, mm-hmm. from competitor services tent. And day 2, I decided to use it for the first time. I'm like, this seems like a handy service. Like, I don't want to carry too much stuff. My bag's missing. Like, it's not a competitor services. Nobody else from the team grabbed it. I'm in last. I'm chasing my tail, looking for my mitts and looking for this and looking for that. Now I don't have any of my cold weather gear for the next day. And that kind of stuff is just the stuff you can't write. You're like, I need that stuff. Like, what now? And as my comrades started falling a little bit, I would borrow their mitts, and I would borrow this and borrow that. And then one morning somebody's like, hey, Mo, I've got your bag. And I'm like, and I was so tired and so late that I actually didn't look at the person's face, but I'm like, you're kidding me. Where was it? And they're like, it was in competitor services. And I'm like, okay, so somebody's gone into competitor services, picked up my bag by accident, and they're now returning it, but luckily I got it back. But there was a day or two there where I was like, oh, I need that bag. I want that bag back. And it showed up, but it's hard because you can't really carry 2 of everything in Malimoto. You just don't have enough room. I mean, you could, and I might take a spare set of winter gloves just to avoid my bag going missing again, just to survive that issue. But that's the kind of stuff that logistically can just really throw a wrench in your spokes. Yeah. And it's I mean, with the weather, it was just so critical to have the stuff that you took and were relying on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, it seems like a crazy mix, right? You don't necessarily think, okay, I'm going to Saudi and I'm going to get dumped rain on for 4 or 5 days of this whole event.
We were told it was going to be cold. We were, fully informed to dress for cold weather. But for them to get all of the rain that they get in a year in the 4 days that we're racing is, it's just next level stuff.
A horrible sequence of events.
Yeah, really, really was. And so with that rain, it's the curve of compounding errors, right? Like you can't sleep in your tent. You're basically flooded out. So all of us would sleep in the competitor services tent 3 inches apart, and then that's where strategy really comes into play. You've got somebody like Paul Neff, who I don't know if you've seen the videos of him snoring, but like his strategy of keeping everybody else awake through snoring really works. Everybody else is tired and he's the only one who got rest. And you can ask Wolfie about it. Wolfie took the video, but he'd wake up in the morning and go to breakfast, and Stuart Gregory from South Africa just looked at Paul and he's like, "You slept well last night." And Paul's like, "Yeah, I really did." And everybody else is just ready to throw food at him. That a lot of that goes on, and the smell in that room, I mean, you can't even imagine. And everybody had the bivouac hack. So, in addition to just sleeping, there was all this coughing going on.
Yeah,
I got sick about 3 days in, lost my voice, was really low energy, but came good in the last half. Like everybody else started to get it in the last half, and I felt like I was coming out of it a bit. And you could see it in my results a little bit. I was riding better and staying ahead of the four-wheeled vehicles. Yeah. But that was a true challenge. I mean, there's just no doubt about it, a true test. I've had some pretty dumb ideas, but doing that race might be the dumbest.
Yeah. Well, yeah. It seemed like a great idea.
It's pretty fresh right now. Maybe everybody's asking me at the end, "You coming back next year?" And I'm like, "Can I have a couple weeks?" Like, I don't know if now is the time to ask that question.
It was interesting. I thought about that before when I was, kind of making my mental notes of, things to ask. And that was actually the top of the list question to avoid.
I need a little more time.
Yeah. No, I mean, seriously, because exactly what you're saying. I'm like, no. I mean, I think anybody you ask that literally just got done doing the Dakar, the answer within weeks of it happening, maybe even months of happening, would you go back? And I would fully expect the answer to be maybe to no. It is what it is. I mean, I've completely different, but I remember when I used to race RC cars semi-professionally, right? This totally not related to this. I mean, obviously it's not as physically demanding, but I remember about this event in Arizona, and it was like, the Dirt Nitro Challenge, and everybody was all about it. You got to go to that. That's the pinnacle. That's like, da-da-da-da-da-da. Well, when qualifying is at 4 a.m. after being up at 4 a.m, and you can't, I was like, no, I'm never coming back to this again.
Yeah.
And now I kind of miss it years later. I'm like, that was kind of cool. But it's kind of the same thing. You push yourself to a point so hard to stay up, to do all of these things, no matter what it is, physical demanding or mentally, that, it's kind of like,
you question everything. We had a night in Riyadh. I'm pretty sure Riyadh is the capital of the kingdom, and they were hosting some political types, VIPs, the cleanest robes you've ever seen with the nicest cars, those kind of folks. And the original by Motul camp is very interesting. We're right next to the food tent, and we're right next to the big screen where they do the presentation for the next day. So good news is you walk 10 feet and you go get your food, not 10 feet, but 100 meters, and you get your food. And on the other side of that building are the showers and the bathrooms. So we're looked after in terms of our logistics. If you're in the back of the bivouac, it's like a 30-minute walk to get to the food tent. So we're lucky that way, but we also, it's like being a captive at the zoo. Everybody coming to dinner comes over to look at the people in the zoo working on their bikes. It's pretty it's pretty distracting, there was one night where I just couldn't be bothered. I didn't want to work on my bike. There were too many people. It was raining. Everybody was in a very confined space. And I just went to bed, and I got up at 3:00 in the morning, and I did all my bike work while no one was around, just the people picking up garbage. And I did tires, air filter, oil change in about an hour and a half with nobody around. And I was super efficient. And and it was great. If I had tried to do that the night before in the rain with everybody coming to the petting zoo, it would have taken me 4 hours, So and back to my original point, when we were in Riyadh and the VIPs were there, they did some presentation for like a national dance and some national music, and they had it on an amplified PA, and it basically sounded like they were sacrificing goats for 3 hours at volume 10. I mean, like when we're going to bed at 6, 7 at night, I don't know why we were there so early, but everybody was like, time to get some rest. And then this, national anthem dance music thing fired up at 8 p.m., like 200 feet from us, and you couldn't sleep through that. Yeah. Maybe Paul could, but you couldn't. You could not sleep through whatever those sounds were. And I don't know where, if you find it on YouTube what that music sounds like, but I mean, it just seemed so unnecessary, and I don't know why they did it or why it affected us so bad, but nobody slept. It was awful.
Yeah.
And it's the kind of stuff you just can't, A, worry about, but B, like, know is going to happen. Like, what? Like, there's no plan for that. There's no preparing for that. I don't care how good your earplugs are. There was no getting around that stuff.
Yeah. God, that's nuts. All the little things, right? The things
variables,
that you just don't.
The variables, all the variables. It's, we're not doing this because it's raining, and it just goes on and on and on. Yeah. It's insane.
So something I'm kind of curious about is, obviously, really, really long days and the gear and talking, and taking care of yourself to make it the distance. What does the bike look like? What's that side of it?
So we finished we finished stage 14. Mm-hmm. We rode 100 kilometers to the finish line podium. Once you do the finish line podium, they impound your bike until 5:30 p.m. and that you can get your bike 30 minutes after they release the results. And if you touch your bike in Parc Fermé or whatever it's called, you're disqualified. And so at like 4:00, I went over to the guy and I'm like, can I have my bike? And he's like, no, you touch your bike, you're disqualified. I'm like, I have to get my shock out of it. Like I have to pack. I have to go to the airport. And he's like, you touch your bike, you're disqualified. And I'm like, okay. Waited till 5:30, pull my bike out of Parc Fermé. The thing would not start. I mean, I don't know exactly how I got all the way to the finish line, but I don't know what I did to it or what really happened. But I mean, I think I got the most out of it I could. I had to push it. I had to push it over to where I was working on it to take my seat off, my seat concept seat home with me, and pull my rear shock out, and then put it in the shipping crate. But it wouldn't start. So I don't know. That was always the trick every morning was, starting your bike. And there was ice on the bikes a couple of the mornings. It was cold, and batteries are what they are, and it was always just a huge relief when your bike started in the morning. But other than that, the bike looked good. I brought my windscreen home, a little memory, and my muffler and mid-pipe were probably a little bit beat up. My carbon skid plate was completely destroyed from the rocks. There's just no other word for it. It's completely a throwaway item. And when you talk to Mason or the Boz Dakar guys, I mean, they were, I think, as a team under the mechanics tents, they were doing 3 skid plates a day in the beginning across the bikes that were racing. And mine made it to the end, but if you saw it, you'd be like, yeah, it's not really doing anything anymore. It's just down to it's not Kevlar. There's some core in there. I guess they make car hoods out of it. It's not carbon, it's carbon wrapped in something that's like this meshy stuff, and it looks like Kevlar, but it's not. Mm-hmm. All that was completely exposed. I mean, it looked like somebody had taken a sledgehammer to it at least 65 times. I mean,
they're just beat.
Yeah, and it makes me wonder if carbon skid plates are the right choice. When it was fast and sandy, maybe they were, but in those rocks in the first 2 days, I really think you could do some development there and maybe a Linden Poskett skid plate, a metal one is the right move. I don't know. I always had an option to just go get another skid plate, but I did use the same one the whole time, and I looked at it at the end, and I just couldn't believe what I was seeing.
I kind of feel like I would have kept it.
Yeah, I don't know if you saw how much stuff I flew home with.
I kind of did.
I don't need any carbon splinters in my bags. But
right.
Yeah, other than that, the bike was solid. Some of my teammates were ripping through rims, some pretty serious dents, and I didn't have any of that. Changed the clutch with Paul on the rest day, and I didn't need to do that. Clutch's Paul was brand new. Mine was probably a little bit more used. I mean, Paul's clutch was so new, I brought it home with me for a spare. I brought mine home too, but didn't do brake pads the whole event. One thing I thought about telling you is, so if we rode, how many miles was it? 50-something, 100 miles?
5,300.
If we did 5,300 miles, I never adjusted my odometer once. I never pushed a button to change my odometer in 5,300 miles. That's how well the ERTF works.
Holy shit.
You don't reset an odometer going into a starting line. It does it for you. It resets it. It resets all the time. It calibrates all the time, I should say. Mm-hmm. So any scenario you're going into a speed zone, it doesn't do it for WPCs, but it does it for WPNs, WPMs, WPS, speed start, speed stop zones. And I was always on one digit. We always have were you running 1 or 2 when you're in North America? Are you running 1 digit or 2 digits after your decimal? And I was on 1 decimal the whole time, never adjusted my odometer. And Bill Conger told me that. And I have to apologize to him because I just didn't believe him. I was like, how is that possible? I'm like, when I get to that tree, I'm going to correct my mileage so I know exactly where I am. And he's like, yeah, you'll see. And I'm like, okay. And I blew it off, and he was totally right. So,
I mean, you're saying it, and I'm just thinking okay, well, the road books that I've done, not that it's many at all, but it was almost every, almost to the point to maybe a fault of mine where, I would get to every, okay, I know I'm here, time to adjust the odometer. Okay,
if you're not syncing with a rally comp or an ERTF, you'd have to do that. Mm-hmm. I'm not saying nobody at home should do that. I'm just saying that I was just surprised. I was legitimately surprised that that's how it went. And before I forget, I want to say thank you to Bill Conger, because at the end of that event, I'm pretty sure I was blowing bubbles. I was just tired and beat, and he totally took me under his wing and got me to the airport. And, he's like, hey, I've been here before. Let me help you, and I was trying to pay him for the rental car and trying to give him money for a little 3-hour nap at the hotel. And he wasn't having any of that. And he was just totally my wingman. And, it got a little lonely at the end. There wasn't anybody left. And Bill and Wolfie were awesome. Bill and Wolfie are, I call him Wolfie, but you guys might call him Peter Vicek, Angelo. I'll call him Wolfie. Wolfie and Bill are really good buds. And, I got to give a huge shout out to Wolfie. He is an animal, literally, and he rode like a beast, and he deserves his good results. And he was nothing but encouraging the whole time. He stopped to help Paul in the dunes, and he came through me later in the stage, and we got to the end, and he's like, I was really hoping you were going to latch onto me and follow me through the dunes and pick up the pace, and you could learn from me and watch from me. And, and then he would give me a couple tips based on what he saw. You got to keep your momentum going. You can't do this and this, but nothing other than a true ambassador and a good rally racer, mentor to me. And, he deserves a lot of applause from my end. He's a good man, and he was a good friend over there. And we kind of got to know each other over there. I feel like we raced against each other a couple times in the past, but never really got to know each other. And what a great guy, he's a good man.
Yeah, that's awesome. We're going to be talking to him as well. But I guess it's the rally family, right? It's a group of you guys that, everybody kind of bonds together over a common sport or a common thing.
Well, not only that, in the Malle Moto camp, I mean, we had some guys, Juan Pedrero, I don't know how well everybody follows the Spaniard guy, but he's been in the top 15, I think, is most of his career at Dakar, and he doesn't have a full ride or a team sponsor or whatever. So they basically stuck him in the Malle Moto camp, but he was racing with a MotoGP number. So that basically what that allows him is to not be paying a mechanic and not be paying for a service support truck because he doesn't have one. But I think in exchange for the organization letting him do that, they made a deal where he kind of had to be a mentor to us. So we had all these meetings in the beginning, the original by Motul meetings and little briefings, and he basically led the first one. And he looked all of us in the eye and he was like, look, I need you all to understand that this original class is the biggest team here. We help each other. Like there's 27 of us. There isn't a bigger team here. Like we look out for each other. We help each other. It's whatever the other person needs. And it really hit home. I'm like, that it kind of goes without saying, but like he cemented it. I mean, it's true. Like all we have is each other, and he also made it really clear that crashing is unacceptable, and that's he didn't want to see any of that. He kind of gave us a slap on the wrist in the beginning, no crashing and stuff. But he's a beast on the race course. I mean, he can ride at that top 15 speed and level, and got to see a little bit of that. My experience again, where my eyes are just wide open when the hero guys all have huge mechanicals and start behind me, and then come through in the dunes, and you're like, God, look at how these guys are riding. They're so loose. It's just on the gas, super loose. And I just don't have it. It's a little concerning, but it's impressive to see,
I don't know how they do it. I always go back to this last Sonora rally and, hearing Skyler come in talking about how fun the dunes were and doing these step ups and all this stuff. And then the guys that come in after him going like, we were trying to follow his lines, but what the hell, and I'm like, wow.
Yeah, and I think he was using some of those lines just for practice. I mean, I don't think that might have been the most efficient way through the dunes, but he just needed to test himself a little bit. Mm-hmm. And with that being said, like I after doing Sonora Rally and Baja Rally this fall, mm-hmm. you can't imagine how hard these stages are at Dakar. Yeah. So if you're getting to the gas stop at Sonora and you're like, whoa, that was hard and I'm over my head, like you're not ready to go to Saudi Arabia. Like you have no idea what is really going on over there. And I thought I might, but I didn't. And I don't know how to ride in the rocks. I don't know how to ride in the sand. Like it is insane. And so some of the people who've raced the Baja Rally might remember the rock section on the Heaven to Hell road book from the coast up to the transfer road. And I think that was 25 kilometers long. Well, imagine it being 400 kilometers long. I mean, like that was the first stage. And I don't know where I was going with all that, but it's hard. The stages are hard. Robbie Gordon always talked about imagine doing a Baja 1000 every day, and now I understand what he's saying. And I haven't done a Baja 1000, so I got to be a little careful with like what I think I know. But I know how hard that race course can be. After riding in it, after everybody goes through it, but the variables are just something that's indescribable.
Yeah. I can say I've done it in 516. I've done it in a couple different classes, but yes, it does get really shitty really fast.
Yeah, and the garbage trucks make it exponentially worse. And I think that if we were going through numbers of participants, that there's a lot more traffic on a Dakar course than a score course. And I could be wrong, but the turmoil in the track is severe. Very, very severe.
Well, not only that, like, I think like, okay, kind of what you were saying. So trophy trucks, when I first started racing, were on 35s, right? And 35-inch tall tires, you were like, that was the setup. And then it went 37s, and then they allowed 42s, and then or 40s, and then I think they may be upping it again. But people at Race Score know that if they've been on those race courses, the holes just keep getting deeper and deeper. Yeah. Well, if they're at 40 inches, the garbage trucks, as we're calling them, I believe their tire size is like 48 plus.
Well, all I can tell you is it takes 3 guys to move one and change one. That's why there's 3 people in those trucks. And when you're standing next to them, they're up to my Adam's apple. I mean, like, it's and they're heavy, they're heavy.
Yeah. And then the thing is that they move. So they have, obviously they're diesel engines. I think they have to be over 1,000 horsepower, and that's on a diesel engine. So the horsepower isn't the impressive number. It's the torque.
Yeah. I should watch like one of the overviews on the Red Bull TV, but it could be twin. I'm pretty sure it's twin turbos, and I think they're way over 1,000. There might be 2 1,000 horsepower motors. I don't even know. Yeah. But when they spool up and they're behind you, you're like, yeah. Okay,
suddenly the trophy trucks don't seem so intimidating. Yeah, maybe even borderline cute.
I think that if you're going to compare a pass alert at Score and a pass alert at Dakar, that the Dakar one works really well, and it's safe. And my anxiety over all that was pretty well kept to bay, because the pass alert function and the algorithm that it uses works so well. Mm-hmm. Like, I do have to say that. Another thing I learned about Dakar, which, I really wanted to take somebody over with me as a handler, like in case something happened to me so I could get home, mm-hmm. like somebody to just get it done and get me home. And the organization, if you get hurt, mm-hmm. the organization flies you home business class, and they fly you home business class with a rep.
Wow.
And I didn't know that. So Kyle and David flew home under the ASO's flight mm-hmm. Scenario. I don't think they chose to go with a rep. We as a team, Aero team, were sponsored by MedJet. Mm-hmm. And I'm pretty sure Paul used his coupon to get home, judging by the pictures I saw this morning. Mm-hmm. I don't think he would have done okay on just a commercial flight. So our MedJet sponsorship worked out great for Paul, and hugely important. And I think that is a smart investment for anybody, leaving the country and racing or riding overseas somewhere. I think that, Paul needs to give the final report on how that all worked out, but it would be a mistake for me not to say it sure looked like it was very relative for our team,
for what you guys did.
Yeah, a good thing to have, and I didn't need to take that handler and that person to get me home. I mean, based on all that information, but
well, having the support, I think that's the big, now, like you said, now you that the organization backs you up and that, and that's very surprising. I mean,
well, dude, the French are. We've touched on it before, and I kind of steered away from it, but in the past, with my sailing background, I've really struggled with the French. Mm-hmm. And after this event, I have nothing but respect for them. You want to talk about a well-oiled, well-tuned machine? Yeah. The ASO is absolutely killing it with their logistical expertise as well as the safety side of things for this event. There can be a helicopter anywhere on the course in 5 minutes, and there are enough of them, believe me. But they use those things like taxis, and I was just thoroughly impressed with the way that they run things. There are situations where you ask a yes or no question and there's 3 answers. I mean, I'm not going to say it's all perfect, but mm-hmm. In terms of how they approach getting things done and their logistics, they absolutely get an A+. It's you're basically moving this city around the kingdom, and they have thought it all through. They've been through it enough that it's just very fine-tuned, and I was super impressed. And everybody at the start lines and the finish lines and the original by Motul, crew, basically, which is who looks after us and unloads our boxes and sets up the tents and puts the fluids out. Like, they couldn't be any nicer. They couldn't be any friendlier, and they couldn't be any more helpful. Like, absolutely all stops pulled to be awesome.
That's right.
And, it took a couple days for the finish line crew to warm up to me, but by the end we were all friends, and they make you a hot tea when you get in, and make you some food, and
Nice.
happy to see you. And it was good. It was good stuff,
man. It's a crazy, it's an absolute crazy journey. And
it is. It is an absolute crazy journey. And the other part of the ASO, I don't know if people realize, is they are the same organizing authority that organizes the Tour de France in July for the bicycle race. So they have 2 events a year, and they're 6 months apart. So I'm pretty sure it's all the same helicopters and stuff, but those are the 2 events that they do. And I think that they do a really good job, and they don't pull any of the, they don't hold back.
And that's crazy. It's, 2 events a year, and the statement on that is the only 2 events a year that they do, and they're both world renowned events.
Oh yeah, the absolute Everest of each discipline. Yeah, and what the French do in sailing with the round the world records and everything else. Like I just have a lot of respect for them. It's pretty sadistic. The whole thing is super sadistic, but boundaries are not really an option, and they really try hard to break a lot of boundaries, and they do it.
And to what you were saying earlier, and about what you're saying now, is I heard in another interview that one of the competitors, I think it was Ricky Brabeck, that wrote a letter to Costera, or I believe that's how it went down, saying, hey, this is like, this year was, too easy. And that was for 22.
Yeah, I wish I'd done it last year. I can tell you that right now. He listened. No, he listened. And I don't think that Ricky was the only one who
did that. No,
who suggested that they make it hard like it used to be. And we talk about the 23 edition being somewhere around 8,500 kilometers or 8,800 kilometers. Mm-hmm. And a good friend of mine is now super into Dakar. And he's been locked up during the whole race with COVID on the internet, watched the history of the Dakar Rally. And, I've just finished the race, and he's like, you got off easy. I'm like, what are you talking about? He's like, well, back in the day, it used to be 15,000 kilometers, Paris to Cape Town. And I basically just wanted to hang up on him. I'm like, okay, whatever. Like, you're right. And it's not as hard as it used to be. And, they used to have to navigate in sandstorms when there was no real navigation, but just line of sight on a tree and this and that. And, it's definitely changed. And I know that, I'm just really glad to have made it to the finish line. I don't know if I'm glad Ricky sent that letter to David, but
well, it definitely seems like a be careful what you wish for moment.
Oh yeah, no, they listened. They listened for sure. I think that there's some smoke and mirrors in terms of the truth and the facts. Like when we got to stage 2 and they said it was 26% rocks and it was like 97% rocks, everybody's like, why would you do that to us? Like, it doesn't seem fair to put that in the stage briefing, because it's just not true. And then to tell us that they're cutting back on liaisons and stuff, like, they didn't do any of that. We would ride 500 kilometers in one direction, spend the night in the rain, do a 130 kilometer special or something like that, and then do another 500 kilometers back to the bivouac we started at the day before. So 1,000 kilometers on the pavement to race 137 kilometers. Just, you'd get back and somebody's like, how do you feel about that? I'm like, it just seemed unnecessary. Not saying it's not supposed to be hard, but you're just going through all this rideable terrain. You're looking at everything going, we could be riding through this. Like, why are we slogging on pavement? The mind does funny things out there. I was in the middle of nowhere in the dunes, and must have been getting hot. And I swear I was hearing fire truck sirens, and I'm like, there's nothing around. What is wrong with you? Like, you're you're hallucinating already. Great.
Yeah.
No, tough race for sure.
Oh, I can. Yeah. Tough by definition. I mean, that's like the definition of it.
And then to revisit our earlier podcast, I mean, do it with the worst tire in the world. Like
Yeah.
the Michelin desert race and the soft sand. I don't even have words. It's just such a mistake.
Yeah. I almost, that was something that I was thinking about earlier, right? With the amount of sand that they had. Now, the ability to run, like say, okay, well, for these stages, because we're like, for instance, hey, we're headed into the empty quarter. Not that you're going to run a paddle tire, but it's like,
well, you could run the Michelin Desert Race Baja tire, which is what Skyler refers to as a knobby tire.
Mm-hmm.
And I was super jealous of Wolfie because he was running one, and he's like, "Well, let me show you why you don't." And he pulled up a photo, and the thing basically explodes on the 500-kilometer transfer after. That the carcass creates so much heat that it kills the mousse. So his mousse looked like a Swiss cheese grater. And I mean, you got to find the balance between durability and performance. And it's either or. There's nothing in the middle about those two setups. And, the company we got the bikes from basically would not give me the option of the Baja tire, the knobby tire, because he didn't want a failure on his shoulders.
Mm-hmm.
And I still don't know all the right words or how to get through it or do it properly or whatever, but I just can tell you that that Michelin Desert Race is the worst tire in the world. And it's not the worst tire in the sense that it didn't get me to the finish. I just mean that, like, when you're trying to get up things and you're trying to turn and it's just sliding and, it's awful.
Yeah, not the tire you want to be on.
No. And to revisit another conversation we had, I mean, I did that whole event with no rim locks. You don't balance your wheels. You don't put rim locks on your tires and your setup. And that continues to surprise me. I guess now I'm a believer, but I was nervous going into it about all that.
It's crazy because I think about, like, so two things already that I've learned. One, the repeaters, the ERTF stuff that is so accurate.
Oh.
And then to me, it's like, I was wondering about that because I was thinking, okay, well, on my 501 that I'm setting up, it's like, do I want to go with the mousses in it, but then I got rim locks, but how do you do the rim locks and all this stuff? So that blows my mind that you don't run a rim lock in it.
You don't run a rim lock. I mean, I guess for your 501, I could tell you that you could run the Michelin Enduro Medium 9100 up front with an M16 mousse and not do a rim lock for sure. The Rally replica rear rim is wider than your 501. And when I talk about lack of rim lock in the rear wheel, it's with an M2 Michelin mousse, which is the mousse that's made for that Michelin Desert Race tire. So if you were going to set up your 501 with the Metzler MC360 and an M14 mousse, I don't know if you're going to have the same positive result of no spinning, but it could be worth trying. I just wouldn't do it during a race first day,
Yeah. Well, and that's I was looking at, there's another company that just started hitting the Instagram and that I've been seeing called Lucioli that does it's a 7 millimeter thick tube that has 2 rim locks integrated into it. So it's kind of I'm curious about that setup. Maybe not so much on the 501, but maybe on the 790 where, I know for sure I can't run mousses. I mean, I could, but it's an adventure bike. It's not a race bike. So I need something that'll do miles.
I just think that with 2 rim locks, you're definitely going to have to balance that wheel.
I'm so OCD about I'm going to buy a balancer just because, on an adventure bike, it makes a difference. I would even do it on a 501, but I wouldn't be religious about it. Like, oh my God, I dropped a weight. I need to rebalance this in the pit.
Well, I hear you there. But over the past 8 years of, doing this and being under Mike Johnson's wing or tutelage a bit, when I started balancing my wheels, the longevity of the tires and the mousses just went through the roof. Like they don't shark fin on the liaisons and they wear evenly and in the end makes your ride more comfortable, especially when you're slabbing it for a couple 100 Ks or whatever.
and to me is exactly like what you just said, is that is it going to make a difference in the dirt? No, the bike doesn't care.
No, not at all.
But the front tire being out of balance and vibrating and already adding to the vibrations of the bike all the way up to the handlebars, that's an issue, because your suspension is involved to deal with a tire that's not balanced. That's how I see it.
Well, it's true. And you're reducing fatigue. I mean, when you talk about riding across the kingdom, anything you can do to reduce fatigue, even as Baja and Sonora, you don't want to put your hands to sleep on your 100-kilometer transfer in the morning before your race. You want your hands to feel good when you get there and the vibration to be minimal. And it all adds up. It all adds up. Your seat has to be comfortable. Your grips have to be comfortable. Your hands have to be warm.
Yeah. Everything.
Everything.
So that was, you kind of touched about it earlier, and I wanted to talk a little bit about the bike setup. So you guys got the bike where you rented it from, right?
We got the bikes from Boz Dakar, a company that Kyle is super familiar with, a company that Skylar as well as Mason have used and gone through. And I think it's pretty safe to say they're the biggest KTM satellite factory team. So it's a feeder team for the pros. Bradley Cox was on that roster. He didn't have a very good rally, but they are trusted. They, stamp of approval. They know what they're doing. They have the right people in place. Them absorbing the ARO team definitely taxed their logistics. I mean, they basically were sending 11 bikes, 6 of which were under their mechanics tent, and then there were the 5 of us characters, on the peripheral side of that. But good group of guys, when it was question time, they understood that, we might need help, and they would stop what they were doing and answer that question. And huge shout out to those guys. Yeah. So rented a bike from Boz Dakar, the 5 of us did. And, I think I had a 2021 RFR that had about 30 or 40 hours on it. And it performed great. I don't know what state it's in right now. I don't know if it's going to start for part when it gets it back to the Netherlands, but treated me right. Good machine. A lot of hours on it now, a little bit more than everybody else's at the premier class, but that's okay.
Hey, well, like you said earlier, I would check. I would put an offer in on your bike versus one of the other bikes for sure. And so that's interesting to me. You rented the bike from them. You've already mentioned it a couple times, but your rear shock. So you showed up, the bike was there. You brought your shock from your RFR here stateside.
I did, because I'm on the bigger side of things. I don't think that Mason's settings or Skylar's settings would really work for me, or a stock standard RFR shock is really for me in particular. So did some work in Valley Center down in San Diego County, and made some adjustments. And David Pearson was part of that tuning process. We took our 2 RFRs to the suspension guru at the same time. We kept mine stock. We did a lot of work on David's in terms of testing. And I did the Baja Rally on a stock RFR shock, and then asked for some help. It was some, next generation shim stacks based on David's setup, and I ran that setup at Sonora. So Baja Rally was a stock shock. Sonora Rally was an altered shock. And after Sonora, we did some more testing and did a full refresh on that shock, and just decided I should bring it with me. I had confidence in where we got with it, and took that. And, it's renting a bike is always interesting. And, if money wasn't an issue and the funding was there, and I get in a good mood and decide to go back again, I would probably try to air freight my machine, not ship it ground, because you lose it for 4 months there and 4 months coming back. You don't have your bike for 8 months, but, I love my bike at home and, eliminate all the variables if I take it. So, you get off the plane 2 days after Christmas and you're basically straight into it with your rental bike. And, maybe, I don't know, maybe I should have gone to a prior FIM event and worked on, ridden the bike and tested it and worked on it and say, okay, I want this, this, and this for Dakar, or gone to the Netherlands and done the bike prep and been there for it to learn the bike a bit. But then it's probably just cheaper to put your bike in a box and ship it.
Yeah.
I don't know all the right, I love logistics and stuff, but the next step is you probably want to have ridden your bike prior to the event, whatever that looks like, whether it's your bike or whether it's your rental bike. You probably want to take it for a spin. Ace did some tuning with Deuced company. I'm not quite sure how to say it, prior to Christmas, and I think I was a little jealous. I was like, gosh, that seems like a really good idea. But I booked my own travel. I did myself in on all that. So just things learned for next time or anybody else.
And you mentioned that, and to me, it's because I know like the suspension side of it. You and a couple other, and not to downplay what other people do, but I know that you particularly and David about suspension and making sure it's just right, and how big of an effect that has on the bike. And then that's what I was really curious about, was like, okay, well, you go and pick up this rental bike that's valved, likely like any other KTM, like it's going to be better than the showroom bike because it's a little bit more dialed in, but it's not your bike.
Yeah, the RFRs have a lot of thought put into them. I mean, they're not cutting corners in assembly or using cheap parts. You're paying for a premier race machine. So stock, they're really not that bad, but like in my scenario, I didn't take my forks. So am I battling an imbalance between what my forks are at home and what these forks are doing? Like I think my rear shock is good because it's been good at home for 2 months, but are the issues I'm facing, are they because of these forks? Like, I don't know what's in there. I don't know oil levels or anything. You have that O-ring on the slider tube and you can judge your travel off of it. And, I sent that O-ring to the base of the stanchion almost every day, and I never had time to add fluid or anything. And maybe I should have made time, but I definitely put the skid plate into the ground a couple times. I mean, I used every millimeter of travel that bike had to offer, and then went to the stops more than a couple times. And, that was my shock and their forks, and you just don't know what you don't know. Like I didn't build that bike. I didn't prep it. I didn't, I've never been into the forks that they had over there. And I just had to run it. And that's, back to just maybe you should ride the bike before you get there.
Yeah. And I'm picturing like what you mentioned earlier. I'm like, well, would it be, is it because it's the whole picture, right? Like the cost of renting the bike versus the cost of shipping your own bike over there. Right. And then the cost of renting the bike versus, and then saying, okay, well, I'm going to buy a case. I think WP has the case, like a specific case for it, but I'm just going to bring the suspension from my RFR that I've spent all this time adjusting and dialing in, and bring that with me.
I got to be honest. You can go to Harbor Freight and buy their 2-gun rifle case on a parking lot sale weekend for $69. And I sold mine to Tony Pallandrini, but I still borrow it and use it. But you could get your suspension across the pond, but if I showed you how much stuff I traveled with to get there, you'd be like, yeah, I understand why you didn't need another thing to get there.
Well, I saw the bags on the way back.
Yeah, that was brutal. I think that what I didn't post was that cart capsizing at least 3 times. Like it was just so heavy. I literally fell over 3 times. And, maybe there's a way to ship stuff and ship suspension and ship this and ship that. But that's all really high risk. I remember Customs and Border Patrol like ruining Linden's forks because they like took the top caps off with a adjustable pliers and took a pick and like scratched like the coating on this and that to see what was in there. And
wow,
it's tricky. It's just the balance. I mean, if you're relying on that stuff, it's like losing my cold weather gloves and my cold weather bag. Like I was relying on that. So if you're relying on your suspension and it doesn't get there or it's damaged or who knows?
Yeah. That's another one. Then I think like, okay, well maybe, if you're on the BAS team, okay, we'll ship it to the Netherlands and then have them like, hey, this is, pick my bike out of the...
But it needs to be there before it goes to the ship in Marseille.
Yeah.
So then your bike's on blocks. I think you have some experience with that in your garage for X amount of months. And you're like, oh, this sucks. Can't move this thing. I need to move around in my garage. And it's tricky. The suspension was probably fine on the Boz bike. I asked him to put my rear spring on, months before we left and it was set up for my weight. But I just chose to take my shock and I did put it in, and I think some of those guys were shaking their head a little bit at me at the Boz tent, but I put their shock back in at the end and it seemed to be okay.
Yeah. Nice. Well, I think that's at the end of the day, you're going to have so many days running that you want to give yourself the best fighting chance.
Yeah. To be comfortable, I took some tools with me that I like to use at my shop at home. I brought my muffin tray for all my little bolts, and I brought my big hot plate thing you find at the buffet. And like when we were changing clutches, that was critical. I just would put clutch parts in that thing instead of in the dirt or on some rag. And a little toolkit that I put together with my Linden organizer and the iPod was a big thing for me, just some music to make me feel like I'm back in my shop at home. And stage 3 was so vicious for me, getting caught by everybody, that I actually, my stepmother's not listening, but I think I put music on for the last 150 Ks of the stage. I was like, I just need to change the tune in my head, I need to distract myself. And it's whatever you can do at that point to get to the finish line for somebody like me. And, just anything to increase comfort level and reduce fatigue and increase mental stability,
Well, this sport, you're what you just said, right? You're on the liaison, the stage is done, the stress of the stage is done, the timed part of it, the semis or the garbage trucks can catch you all they want, on the road section. But it was funny because there's a video that I saw the other day and that was specifically talking about that. I was watching it, that, you're the mentality and the mindset, and the downward spiral starts off so vague and then increases so quickly, right? In negative thoughts and stuff like that. And so,
you question everything, Victor. You question your existence. You question like this. You're like, this is what I'm doing for fun. Like, this is what I choose to do with my money and my time off. And that's a vicious motivator for somebody like me. Like I was Jeff Bezos, I would have called the chopper, come pick my ass up. Like, this is dumb. And then you're like, okay, well, let's say I did want to pull the pin. I still have to get out of the desert. So why not just finish the stage, and you finish the stage and you feel fine. And you're like, there's no reason why I can't continue. So you continue. But like, I almost, I can't really afford to go back. So in terms of sick motivation, I just had to get it done.
Mm-hmm.
And there were guys in the Malimoto thing who, pulled me aside stage day 5, day 6. And they're like, look, I didn't finish my first Dakar because I was soft and because I just mentally failed. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, and how did it go when you got home? And they're like, I was the worst human in the world. I was yelling at everybody. I was unhappy. And I'm like, so you wish you'd finished it? And they're like, yeah, I wish I'd stuck it out, and you hear those stories and it helps, you realize that you have to achieve the goal, or you want to achieve your goal. And so you apply yourself. And I don't think I could have made it any harder on myself. I think I spent twice the time on the bike that the premier pros did, like if they're doing it in 40 something hours and I did it in 80 something hours, I mean, you couldn't make it much harder on yourself. But I also, I can't refinance my house every year. So
Yeah.
I don't know how to, I really did have just one shot at this. And not only could I not afford to go back, but like I couldn't afford to get hurt. So I don't know if that affects my speed. I'd love to tell you that I'm faster, but I really don't think that I am. And, but it's a sick motivation. It's a sick motivation when you can't afford to go back and you can't afford to crash. And you just have to remember that all you have to do is get to the finish line.
Yeah.
And it worked out. I feel really lucky that my bike was healthy and everything else. I never envisioned doing that without my teammates. I know there's going to be attrition, but if you have a positive vision or you think about the positive things or the positive goal, at least one of them was there with me at the end, and it got a little lonely. It got a little lonely, and I couldn't have done it without all of them. Kyle McCoy's statement in our feature was correct. If you took all five of us and put us into one rider, it would actually be a pretty good rider. And I don't know which part of that rider I am, but definitely not the fastest out of the group. And I was missing those guys. I mean, we did it together in the end, even though they weren't there. And I have nothing but thanks for all the support. I couldn't have got through rest day without David Pearson helping me. When I got in, it's raining and it's, I don't even know, 8:30 at night. And he's like, you've got 10 minutes to submit your laundry if you want to get it cleaned, and we bought these vouchers like days before. And you're like, you're soaked to the bone wearing everything you have and you're cold. And it's like the last thing you want to do and the last thing you have time for. But, he helped me. Just the support, it was good to see. And, we were a team, and if somebody needed something, we did it, and, I started losing them all pretty quickly, but, so I hope I represented them and well, I think it would have been bad if all five of us hadn't made it. I think it would have, it's a true statement to that race because it's the hardest race for a reason. It's hard.
Yeah. No, that's, like I said, is a bucket. I don't think anybody should be heading to their first Dakar or even first 5 Dakars or whatever number you want to put on it. I don't think anybody should be heading to the Dakar thinking I'm going to go win this thing flat out without have previously finished it and previously done well at the event. And I mean getting to the line.
Yeah, I became friends with Mohammed Belushi, guy from Dubai. He runs Dubai MX, and he has a teammate or a really close friend from Kuwait, number 71. And excuse me, I pulled in on a 500-kilometer liaison. Those guys pulled into some food stand, and I couldn't read anything. And I was like, "Can I join you guys? Like, I'm just cold and tired, and I'm falling asleep on the bike." And I became friends with these two guys. And Mohammed, he also goes by Mo. He was racing the GP class, number 25 or 35, and those guys became friends, and they kind of, asking some questions at the food stop, and have you done Dakar before? And I'm like, no. And they're like, and you chose to race the hardest class your first time? And I'm like, well, it's complicated, but it's the class I could afford to race. And no Americans ever finished it before, so there's 5 of us just trying to throw as much of it at the wall as we can to see what sticks. And they kind of looked at each other and they looked at me and they just went back to their food. And I was like, yeah, these guys know because they've been here before. like we're not even halfway through it. And they're like, this kid has no idea what he signed up for. Yeah. Yeah. And I don't think anybody does. I can listen to everything everybody says, all the mentors, all the coaching. And until you realize what they were saying, or maybe I'm just a hard learner, but I do have to say that, Andrew Short was there and he was under the Can-Am South Racing tent, navigating for Molly Taylor from New Zealand, who's a World Rally WRC driver. And he was so good to me. He would check on me all the time. And, I'd ask questions about some navigational things, ERTF or Dakar Roadbook specific. And he's such a skilled navigator that he knows the answer. So it was actually saving me a lot of time, but just no ego, no boundaries, super helpful, just a true ambassador for the race or for rally. And even though he's in a car, he was, when it was time to be in the petting zoo and people would come over for dinner, he was like the only person I was happy to see come through because it was helpful. Not, like I was super tired one night and I was trying to put a new wheel on my bike and it was backwards. I had the sprocket and I had the whole thing in backwards, and he just kind of looked at me. He's like, "You tired?" And I'm like, "Yeah." He's like, "Okay, your wheel's backwards." I'm like, "All right, thank you." Like just blowing bubbles. And he was awesome. He was, he'd give me advice over the event and very much appreciated. Yeah. The tent that he was racing under, the South Racing Can-Am scenario, it's a little bit of a side blip, right? But this team had 26 side-by-sides. I call them angry golf carts. They had 26 golf carts racing under their tent. They had 200 people in their camp between mechanics, cooks, fabricators, drivers, navigators, and logistics people. Each buggy, each side-by-side golf cart is paying, $300,000 to race. There's 26 of them. So that's like an $8 million project. When you talk about score and trying to eliminate bikes and you talk about Dakar and it's all about money, like the money isn't in the bike class at all. Like it's, they want that truck and buggy and golf cart money, because it's real and it's big. And not only were there 26 of them, at $300,000 a piece, there's a waiting list a mile long. Like people can't get in. And that's true for the bikes as well. They reduced the bike numbers this year because I think they were trying to speed up the earlier starting times for the bikes and for the cars and the trucks. And with that being said, I feel lucky to have gotten my entry accepted. I think Boz Dakar was a huge part of that. I think that people who just think you sign up for Dakar and go, like, you might not get in. When Bill Conger talks about racing bikes, there was over 188 bikes. This year it's 127. So if they've cut 50 bikes out because they're trying to reduce logistics and reduce, speed bumps for the cars and the golf carts and the trucks, like they're doing it. And I don't think the money's in the bikes. I think they're getting the money from the four-wheeled vehicles.
That is absolutely crazy. And you got, I think it's because I can see the demand for the cars and for a rental program because you got somebody else with you and there's less people that know how to ride bikes and there's even less people that have the confidence and the skill. I see the guys on the bikes as the cowboys. These guys it takes a mentality. It takes a certain toughness to be able to do that. So I could see instantly where a rental program for vehicles on the side-by-sides or the golf carts is going to be popular, right? There's a lot. I mean, you see it in the States anyway. You got more people with money than brains.
It's safer. Yeah. The side-by-side thing exploding in North America is a bummer.
Yeah.
It's dangerous out there. And the more of them I see on fire, the happier I am.
Yeah. Well, I would love to see them, honestly. Like, I would really love to. So this was something that always stuck with me, that it was, why I'm having trouble remembering the name of the company, but we used to go to the sand show all the time. When I worked at Mendiola, they were a great, he started building race cars too. It was not racer, but he would not turn a customer loose with their car until they did a full day in the desert with him, learning how to drive. And no matter what request they made for gearing and what top speed they wanted, the answer was no, and it's geared this way, and this is going to be your top speed. Yeah. So that, if they did that, if the manufacturers, I would love to see, going on a total rant here, but Yamaha, Polaris, Can-Am, all of these guys that are putting out side-by-sides in quantities, they should make a driver's academy very accessible to these guys. One, they're going to earn way more cool points with their customers and more loyalty. And two, there's going to be a statistic that's going to drop because of that.
Yeah. Well, I can only think that would make things safer for everybody.
Yeah.
And I'm a fan of if that's the way it's going, for sure.
Yeah. I like, to me, is one of those things that it's, my brother races side by sides, and as much as I don't like riding in the car with him because he freaks me out,
he knows how to drive, right?
He's a shoe, but we grew up racing in the desert, and we grew up with the rules, and we grew up with the things that, and I don't know how many times working at Mendiola, I had guys on the phone telling me that, I'm building it. This is my first sand car. I just wanted to talk to gearing, and, my customer service, like, okay, let's talk a little bit about it. Tell me about the car. And next thing you know, 700 horsepower is the first sand car they bought. And the reason it's getting 700 is because their buddy has 650, and they rode in his car, and they've never driven one.
Right. I mean, that was, the flip side of that is having access to a company or an outfit like Dakar and Bart. When we had a question, like you were saying about the manufacturer, he knew the answer. Like, it's okay with the second gen gearbox and these RFRs. This is your gearing, and this has happened. And he's like, it can only be two things, and the experience is there. The guidance is there, whether I was trying to get away from the Michelin Desert Race or not. It was like, look, you can't afford the option to fail. If you do, that's why we don't do it. And that's the kind of stuff that's hard to hear, but very real and good advice if you've got the, sand cleaned out of your ears. And, the experience from, it's not really the manufacturer at this point, but if it's the most successful KTM satellite factory team, like, you need to listen to what that guy's saying, like, and take it in. And I appreciated all of that. So,
yeah, I mean that, and that's an interesting, like how you're saying, is they know they're the authority on it. And it's almost like a fail safe at some point in that rally, being so many days and so long. Yeah. You're going to get to, I don't care who you are, you're going to get to the point where you're blowing bubbles.
I know it.
And so it takes somebody like that, like, nope, this is what you need to do. Just, I know you don't, just no.
No, exactly. They, so Kyle McCoy finished in 2020, but he brought home his 2019 RFR, and that has the first gen gearbox in it. And that gearbox was very specific for South America, and it was very specific for crossing the Andes and being at, some insane amount of meters, 9,000 meters or whatever, looking and starving for oxygen. So it's funny, like, the things you remember, right? Like, so Kyle goes out and does the prologue, and he comes back and he's like, my bike makes this really weird noise when I'm on the gas. And in the end, we figured out that it was his rev limiter. Like, he's banging off, McCoy the cowboy is banging off the rev limiter on the prologue, and he couldn't really do that on his old bike with his old gearbox. So the bike he rented there had a second gen gearbox, and
probably a little taller gearing, I'm guessing, because starving for oxygen,
a lot taller.
No.
So like we were rocking 1451 sprockets here. And the first gen gearbox for South America runs a 1349, and I think they're night and day different. Like, Matt Sutherland knows it, and he basically bought a new motor with a next gen gearbox so that he could move forward. And Kyle now realizes, he had some good things to say about the new gen gearbox, and and I think there was some talk in there with Bart, like, how much does it cost to upgrade the gearbox? Like, Wolfie had an old gearbox. Bart's upgraded some gearbox. It's a couple $1,000s in parts. But very different. One is designed for Saudi and one is designed for South America. And I don't know what the point of all that was, but there's just some things. There's lots of things that the KTM satellite factory team knows, and it's, that kind of knowledge only helps us. If I ship my bike in a box, I don't have access to all that knowledge unless I'm friends with them on a side level, and I'm not submitting them money to be a customer. I'm kind of on the sidelines and stuff, but The bivouac is an amazing thing. I kind of need glasses every now and then to read my manual for torque settings and stuff. And one of my screws was coming loose, and I went over to the Bahrain Sebastian Loeb TRX tent, whatever it's called, and found the electrician. I was like, "Can I borrow your smallest screwdriver?" And those guys, when they see you're like a Malimoto guy, everybody just drops everything. They give you whatever you need. It's awesome. Like, I didn't take a screwdriver for my glasses, and then I broke a lever off one day, and everything was packed up, and we were going on a marathon stage, and I didn't realize that I hadn't filed the lever off before, at night when I got in on my work list, and I went over to a side-by-side in a golf cart tent, and I was like, "Can I borrow a file?" And they're scrambling to get their race car ready for their customer or whatever scenario is, and just drop everything. Let me get you a file. Give me 2 seconds, and so the bivouac support scenario is just, everybody has a lot of respect for the bikes, and everybody, they might think you're crazy, but like the Malimoto thing is pretty well looked after, and there's an unwritten code that, you look after these people. They're working the hardest, and in theory, and the camaraderie is there. It's good.
Yeah, that's crazy. And I mean, and it's like they recognize what you guys are up against, and what you're doing, and the fact that they're willing to help out. I mean, that's.
I mean, I have so much respect for Skylar, Jacob, Wolfie. In theory, I'm the only one who knows what they rode through, all 14 stages. I mean, when you reflect back on how hard it was, and like, those guys are animals, absolute animals, like doing it at pace, doing it at speed. Wolfie had a big one day 1 or day 2, and I think he did some ribs in, and then because of that, he might have turned it into a back issue a couple of days later, and he was definitely not 100%, and he persevered. He worked harder than anybody, and Jacob, Herrenhound champion. Like, I don't think you can take that away from him in any way. Like, he's the fastest guy in the desert for whatever year he won his Herrenhound championship, and he, he's in the 20s in that race, and that just, like, what Skylar is doing speed wise, and all the people around him in the premier class, like, they must be so thankful when they get done safely with something like that, because they are risking it all. Yeah. Like, there's just no way around it. And I don't think Jacob would ever have any real reason to talk to me prior to this race. He wouldn't know me, he wouldn't know anything. And by the end, he was just such a supportive guy and encouraging me to hang in there, and that I did it. And the four of us, like, it's this little crew that kind of made it to the finish line, and I'm thankful for those guys, all three of them. They were always positive with me and pointing me in the right direction, and it was good.
That was awesome. And I mean, it
is, dude,
Dakar finisher.
Yeah. I got it. I mean, the first day, the last gas stop, I thought they were going to pull me off the course. It was getting dark, and I had a long way to go, and there was a lot of rocks, and I was just feel very thankful that I made it to the finish line, because there was just that airbag thing, or the uncharged airbag, and I thought they were going to pull me off the course. I mean, kind of put me through a little bit of a systems check, and I kind of told him to go fuck himself. I mean, I was like, look, there's nothing wrong. What do you want? And I wasn't falling for the bait. Like, it was a little bit of a pupil check. It was a little bit of a talk to me, to tell me how you're doing. So I just thought best American way is to just tell them where to stick it. Well, there's no option for me to ride the pavement home right now. Like, just go eat your eat your stinky cheese and
you eat corn the long way. I'm headed to the finish line.
Yeah. And there were moments too, like the end of stage 1, I just finished my first Dakar stage, and for me, that's an achievement. And I've got a pretty long liaison back to the bivouac, and it's definitely going to be dark by the time I get there. And the camera crew's at the finish, and they're like, "Do you have time for a few words?" And at this point, I didn't know any better, and I'm like, "Yeah." And they're like, "Okay, take your helmet off." And I'm like, "Oh, this is already a mistake." I don't have time for this because I'm slow. And I take my helmet off, and he's like, "Okay, so you're, this French guy, you're the last bike to finish. How does that make you feel?" And I was like, "Well, it makes me feel like, I want to ask you whether you're from the south of France or the north of France, dickhead. Like, I don't know. I don't know. Like, what do you want? I'm just really, and then I didn't say any of that, but I'm like, yeah, I'm just really happy to be here. And this is my first Dakar stage finish. And so I'm 1 for 1. And I got out of that situation. And then in the next days, I just said, no, I'm good. Like, I got to get back. And I get back to the bivouac, and all these people want to talk. And I'm like, I don't have time for this. Like, I don't know you. I don't need to be interviewed. You don't want to hear what I have to say. Like, I'm not creating content for you. I was on the bike twice as long as everybody else today. Like, I don't have time,
Yeah.
And so it was a part of that was just turning the noise off. I had to stay off social media, and I had to stay off all the podcasts because I could only imagine how it was going. I just wanted to stick my head in the sand, like last in the prologue, last in stage 1, pretty much last in stage 2. Like, I was like, this is just, I can't imagine anybody's rooting for me, but you sell enough t-shirts and you put enough stickers on your bike or your sponsors, and every time you're picking it up, you're doing it for them. It's like a little bit of a guiding force. And when you're more or less self-funded, I mean, I had people helping me, don't get me wrong, but when you're more or less covering it to be sure, there's some kind of a sick motivation to get to the finish. I think that if I was just rolling around in it and there was money and I could go back, like, I don't know if I would have finished that race. Like,
it's it's an interesting life lesson. What they say, right? Like the trust funds and the kids that, never had to work for the money. It's easy for them to piss it away.
Oh yeah.
And I mean, this obviously extrapolating from there is like, okay, well, no, this is when it's self-funded, when there was so much sacrifice on the line, the word, you can't, it's a select few that can afford to go back more than once. It's a very select few that could even go once. So,
my best friend, had a quick chat with him the other day. He doesn't ride bikes at all, and his kids are super into what I'm doing. I sent his kids some t-shirts and some stickers, and now they're hooked on Dakar. They had no idea, but he was like, "You going to go back next year and get a sponsor?" I'm like, "I don't think you understand. Like, you don't get sponsored for being last. Like, you don't, like the factory teams aren't calling me, like, what sponsor are you talking about? Because, like, I'm on my own path here with what I've chosen to do."
Yeah. And I don't know what you chose to do and what you accomplished.
Yeah, exactly. But it's scary when you know that, you can't go back, or if you do go back, you're going to have to, I remember the catalyst in making this decision, and it was when I was watching Skylar Howe's All In documentary. Here's Skylar as a privateer, completely chasing his dream and selling everything to do it. And I'm like, well, I mean, I could rearrange my life a bit, sell some stuff, redo my house with the bank and go. Like, what's my excuse? Like, Skylar's, that was a part of me making a decision. Like, I don't really have an excuse. Like, I can steal the money for myself and figure it out and go. And at that point, you're chasing your dream. You're out in a wing, and you can't go home on stage 1. It's that'll be the most expensive day of your life ever. And then what? I got to sit around the kingdom for 14 days waiting for my flight to go home. Like, no, just keep relentlessly moving forward. Just do not stop moving. And it worked. I avoided getting pulled off the course. I avoided an issue with not having my airbag charged. I made it through all of the dangerous liaisons, and at some point you got to think you're being looked after. Like you're just your chips have fallen properly, everything's aligning just to get you where you need to get to. It takes a lot. It takes a lot to get to that finish line. A lot of interesting poker chips for sure. And I feel thankful. And my teammates, I'm thankful to all of them. Kyle is our veteran who's finished. All of his advice was critical, and we worked well together as a team while we were together, and lessons learned from that moving forward in the end. And yeah, it was good.
Yeah, it's absolutely. I mean, it's a huge accomplishment, and
I didn't really realize. I don't know if I've honestly realized that I've made it to the finish line yet, and it's really the support of the good words that people are giving me that have reaching out are like I don't totally have words for it, because I'm still honestly surprised. Like I didn't do very well, even though that wasn't the goal, but the support and the encouragement has been completely overwhelming. And halfway through that event, I just wanted to stick my head in the sand. I'm like, gosh, I'm embarrassing USA Rally. I'm North America. Who wants to do this badly? Nobody, and you just question everything. And like you said, the bit of a tailspin, and that you start the mental game. And if you're not keeping it afloat, it can start sinking on you a bit. But just really thankful to everybody who's given me an attaboy, because I probably need it. As a little bit of a beating in the results. I didn't get a ton of penalties. I think I had 31 minutes in the end, or 32 minutes of penalties, and I don't regret those. I mean, I try to avoid them, but I can remember each one of them clear as a bell, and I racked up some on the last day in the mud, and I just wasn't going back and dealing with mud pits. I'm like, you know what? I'll just take it. Like I don't need to go lose my bike in a mud pit to capture a VCP or whatever we're calling it.
Yeah. And it's an interesting decision, right? Is this the one? You've avoided everything. You've not avoided, but you've persevered through everything. And I can totally see that decision. Is this the one that I want to go back to?
No. I skipped one in the dark too on stage 2. I was like, I'm not going backwards into the garbage trucks, into the main line to, no, I'll take the penalty. Like it's dark. It's not going to really affect my day. And,
but quickly the other way, if for some reason. So no, it's all of that is smart.
Yeah. I mean, doing the race from the beginning probably isn't smart, but, yeah, I mean, there were people around me in the results who had 19 hours of penalties, and I'm sure some of that's mechanically related and this and that, but I mean, to get out of it with just 31 minutes, I can stomach that one. If it had been daylight on the first one, I probably would have gone back. If it had been not muddy on the last day, I probably would have dealt with all those properly, but it is what it is. I made it to the finish line, and, happy for the finish. That's all I really got.
Yeah. No, it was encouraging to see, as everybody was rooting for the team and everything that was going on. And yeah, I mean, there's a ton of people here rooting for you. People knew your name because of what you were doing and where you were at. And so the finish line was the best thing ever, for everybody watching. And we kind of put that weight on it. I was like, okay, it's not about time for him. It's about that finish line. And yeah, spending all the time. I don't care who you are. Honestly, this is by no means. I
just
would question.
Give it to me.
No, it's not even you. I'm trying to figure it out, because I'm not trying. I don't know how many people from you on up could do what you did to persevere that. I mean, the finish line is one thing, but the times, and to spend that much time out in the desert and to ride all of that stuff.
Well, that's what some people who have done this before basically mentioned to me, I mean, Andrew being one of them, he's like, man, I was looking at your times the first 2 or 3 days, and like nobody should be physically be able to continue. And I was kind of taking it the way it wasn't intended. And he kind of had to sort me out. He's like, Mo, it's a compliment. Like you persevered, and he's like, I'm not saying I didn't have faith, but he's just saying what you did is basically, it could be the dumbest thing you ever did. True. Yeah. Like, he didn't say it like that, but, it was a compliment because I was on the back foot with my time from stage one, just out there a lot, all night, when you talk about overall times, like 40-ish hours for the pros and 80-ish hours for me, like none of that counts liaison time, you know? So, there were 3 500-kilometer liaisons, and that's the kind of stuff that really breaks you down. So yeah, I hear what you're saying. There's a lot of tough people in front of me. I mean, I don't want to say they couldn't have done the same thing, but it's just, why would you want to?
Yeah. There's instead of a resounding, yeah, they could also do it, there would be a question mark there.
Yeah. You know, is this a good idea? Is this really fun? All that stuff. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And that's so, yeah, absolutely. My hat's off on that, dude. I mean, that was, thanks, man. That it's just the finish line. I mean, at the end of the day, the time doesn't even matter anymore. It's just the finish line. I mean, just the time itself, the fact that you stuck with it to do that many hours to get to that finish line. But I mean, first and foremost, it's the finish line.
Yeah. I mean, we trained all summer. I don't want to say all summer, but we did a lot of riding this summer, and it was 12-hour days. Set up your tent, pass out, break down your tent, and go riding again for 12 hours. Like, I'm not saying they were as hard of a 12 hours as what I just did, but like putting the body through that essentially was the training that worked for me.
That rhythm. That was
just the abuse. I mean, just endless riding and endless vibration, and then doing it again the next day and just beating the body into submission. I actually felt pretty good after the race. And now that it's 3 or 4 days later, and I've probably been sitting around a little bit, I'm talking up, but I'm not on the bike moving around using all my muscles and staying loose. It's now that I'm not moving, everything's starting to get stiff.
Yeah, everything's relaxing now into place.
Yeah, the adrenaline is oozing out. Yeah, exactly.
Oh man, dude, that's awesome. I'm just I'm stoked. I can't wait to do a ride. I mean, how soon are you going to start riding again? do you even want to get on the bike?
Riding to Tierra del Fuego on February 1st. So we're starting a ride to the tip of South America. I think we're going to do it in stages. Bought some $4,000 piece of junk off Craigslist, and going to ride to either Guadalajara or Honduras. Put the bikes in storage for, I don't know, probably 6 months, and then do another leg down, and leave the bikes in storage again, fly home, and it seems a little soon for that, but it's organized, and I think I'm going to do that. So do a 2-week stretch in the beginning of February and get pretty far south, and I don't know if that's the answer you were looking for, but that's the plan.
Nice. No, that's good. I mean, well, signing right up for the next adventure. And February. So you're talking a couple of weeks from now.
Yeah, less than 10 days or something. Yeah, yeah. Could be a mistake. I don't want to mislead you. No. That's the plan at the moment, and gonna give that a go. So
nice, dude. That's awesome.
I feel like I learned a lot with the Olympic trials. I didn't have anything in the books after the Olympic trials, and they didn't work out. And then it was just a boat without a rudder, kind of, so to speak. No direction, no plan, pretty misguided. And some other people on this ride that we're talking about know that, and they don't know about my Olympic stuff, but just having the next thing, And I don't know if that was a catalyst for making that trip, but, we had that talk about having something to look forward to after, the big one, however you want to put it. And, so that was a little bit the catalyst for that. And I don't know. I think it's good. I mean, I don't think they're going to do long days like we were just doing in Saudi, but, I should be okay. I should be ready for it.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, there's a little bit more control. This seems like a great place to stop.
Yeah. I can stop and take a picture and look at the scenery. Yeah, I've been watching the highlights, and I'm like, I don't remember riding through that. I don't remember seeing all that cool stuff. So these trips are different because you can pull over and take a leak and not worry about it.
Yeah. Unlike Dakar, they start questioning you. We see you were stopped here for.
Yeah, exactly.
Dude, that's awesome. Well,
experience of a lifetime, and I appreciate you and you kind of getting North America organized in terms of the information. It's good.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm looking forward to more of it. I mean, this year is going to be a busy year. Are you planning to be in that Sonora rally?
Yeah, I am. I'm on the fence. I'm going to have to essentially buy all the ERTF stuff, which is, you need some repeaters and you need a mount for the brick and stuff like that. So if I'm not racing, I'm definitely going to volunteer in some way, whether that's be part of the sweep team or help the org in any way I can. I'll be there. In terms of entering the race, I haven't entered yet, but there's still time, and I don't know, my attitude might change in a couple of weeks.
Yeah, there's and I given it away, but this is all going out of order. But I actually, in a little bit, I got a call with Darren, and we're doing an episode to talk about some of this stuff because they have the national class.
Yes, and I asked him about Darren came over to see us off the podium. I mean, he had some other ulterior motive in promoting Sonora, but he came onto the podium, the Starline podium, to wave my start flag. And that's another highlight for me. I'll never forget that guy, and I appreciate that so much. And I think it's good for him to watch his little, ducklings fly out in the world and all that. But I did pull him aside and I was like, hey, look, how do I ride the same distances as the GP riders in your race? How does that work? And am I in the national class or am I in Rally 2? And he's like, the national class is going to be shorter mileage because of fuel range on a 501 gas tank or etc. So if you want to ride with the big boys, you have to race Rally 2. And I think if you want to race Rally 2, you're going to need an RFR. And that's a whole nother, the Canadians, Eli Tomac, whoever, they want to race Sonora and learn as much as they can and get ready for Dakar. You need to be calling one of the big teams right now to get your bike. I saw that Boz Dakar has one bike to rent left for Sonora, and they're air freighting over all of their equipment, and they're not bringing any trucks. And I had talked with Bard about helping him with logistics, and I don't think I can because I don't really have a way to tow a trailer, but that's an option for somebody in North America if they wanted to see that race and make a little bit of money, if they had a crew cab and a big box trailer and wanted to do logistics for one of the satellite factory teams. But I'm getting distracted. But the national class is going to be the 4.5 to 5.3 gallon tanks and a little bit shorter of a race course. And I'm pretty sure that you don't have to run an FIM spec tire, which is all great news. And you can run your 501. And I think they call it Rally 3. I'm not totally sure. But if I wanted to, continue with what I'm doing this year, I already have my FIM license, which is a big thing required to race Rally 2. I have my rally bike here, but I'd have to peel off my North American rally equipment and put on kind of the Rally 2 level, a couple repeaters and way to mount all of the organization stuff. And it sounds like it's $1,000 cheaper to race the Rally 3 or the National class than the Rally 2 class. So I don't really think it's going to be an eliminator for the North American Rally light bikes. Like I think your cost is right where it needs to be, and I think the course is going to be a little bit friendlier, and people shouldn't be scared off. I think Darren's honestly, legitimately going to look after everybody who's supported him in the past with that kind of racing.
Yeah, I agree with that. He, that was something that was very clear in every conversation we had. Once the news broke that he was going to be around, that, he was very clear that, he didn't want the Sonora Rally to lose its flavor that it already has and lose the competitors that it already has. At the same time that the internet was going off saying, there goes this event. And so I think he's done a pretty good job. That's why I'm looking forward to this conversation and getting that out on air, because it's the people that really know and that really cared already know there is a home for them still. And so it's just some people.
I want to reiterate that he's really going to look after, the national class. I don't think there's a concern there. And unlike the French, I actually believe Darren. The one variable, not that has nothing to do with anything, but the road books are now written by the ASO characters. So it's going to be a different flavor, I think, that everybody's used to. And I don't know if the national class will be different. I don't think it would be. But the national class road books will be based off gas stops and gas range. And I don't know if you guys haven't seen one of these French ASO road books. They are no joke. Like, you need to start studying. I don't know.
They need to be on point.
Need to be on point. And I asked about it. I asked about distances. I was like, so we do Sonora, like, are there 500 kilometer liaisons and, 400 kilometer stages? And they're like, yeah, you should expect that. It's not going to be, well, at least for Rally 2, right? But you shouldn't expect short days if you're in the Rally 2 or GP class. Yeah, I think they're going to be pretty real.
Yeah, that's what I'm looking forward to it. I'll be down there as well. So
yeah, I have to say that if you're in North America and I haven't scared you away from all this stuff yet, that you should seriously consider doing Dan's ride on St. Patrick's Day in the Mojave Desert. 4 days of road books. Looks like he's got a registration link now, but that was really my start into this whole thing. I mean, he's a bad man, like he's part of the reason. He is one of the reasons that, I'm in this mess 8 years later. Like I went to his SoCal Rally event as a qualifier for Baja Rally. I was too cheap to pay for a Baja Rally training class. So I think Dan essentially organized the SoCal Rally to actually beat that rule and be supportive for people. And, if you want to get some road books under your belt and see what a bivouac is like and camping in the dirt, I highly recommend that being your springboard. And then next one after that is, if you can get into the Wyoming Tulip Festival, that's another good one in July, or it's the end of June. And obviously if you live on the East Coast, Wyoming's a lot closer than California. So maybe you do that one, but you can't just go to Dakar. Like, you have to go and do these events. You have to do Sonora. You have to do Sonora Rally Training School. Anytime you can go to a rally comp training scenario in El Paso, those are like gold, and there's so much sand there. And, you're with some really good mentors in that scenario. And so, yeah, I mean, if you're going to lay out a little bit of a road book for people, SoCal Rally, Wyoming Tulip Festival, Rally Comp training in El Paso, Sonora Rally Dunes training, Sonora Rally, none of that stuff should be missed. You need all of the knowledge gained at those events. There's nothing, there's no skipping around it. There's no shortcuts.
Yeah. Yeah. If I I have that overthinking mentality, and that taking that first step, and like what you're saying is here's the first step. Just do this first.
Yeah, it's free. It's free. Like maybe a case of IPA or whatever he drinks, but Dan's thing. If you had asked those guys after day one of me being there if I was ever going to go to Dakar, they all would have spit their drink on the ground and laughed at you. I learned so much about what needs to happen at those events, and Scott Bright's training events too. I didn't mean to leave that out, but there's, what you learn at those things is how to read a note in a road book, and how to navigate and get into a flow, and there's always room for improvement, and everybody's road books are different. So the more access you get to them, the better off you are. Mm-hmm. I could go on and on and on about that, but Dan's awesome, and he writes a really good road book, and I highly recommend it. And, hope to see some people there. I feel like that could be my next riding, with a road book for sure. I can't do Sonora Dunes Rally training. I'm working, but, hope to see everybody at SoCal Rally, and thanks to Dan for all the hard work, because I don't think anybody realizes how hard it is to write a bunch of road books. I think he's got somebody else helping him with road books this year, so hats off to him as well. But those guys are out there crunching it, and all their road books just got ruined by rain, I'm sure, so they have to probably
now they got to go out,
redo everything. But.
Yeah, new safeties and all that stuff. Yeah, I've actually I haven't really told anybody, I guess, on the air and you first, but that was I was actually thinking of signing up for that.
You should. I will ride with you every day. I feel like that's the kind of event where you team up with somebody who's been there and you do it, and it'd be great. I think you should, and I'm super supportive of that. And I'm also super happy to see that David Manriquez, the man we call NAR, has signed up for Baja Rally. It's like, finally, you should be racing. You should be doing it. So it was funny. I want to see you guys out there. It's good.
Oh, yeah. No, I'm kind of looking forward to it. I'm like, all right, I got the 501. I'm almost done with the Moto Minded tower on it, doing all that stuff. So it's getting really close, and now I'm like, okay, I think I can do it. And it's funny that you mentioned NAR. A few minutes ago, he literally called in and interrupted the. I sent him a text. I'm like, dude, I'm on the phone with Mo. But yeah, I mean, I gotta reach out to Dan and see what's the deal on that one, and just try and make some time for it. It's going to be, it's interesting. I mean, there's if you want to get into rally, North America will keep you busy.
Oh yeah,
you don't need to go to Dakar.
I don't think it was always that way. I don't think it was always like a calendar conflict all the time with this and that rally and everything else. But like there's a way to do a race in the spring, do a race in the fall, do a session in the summer. Like, it's all there. Mm-hmm. And if you can't afford to go to those 3-4 events, like, I don't know how you're going to get to Dakar.
Yeah.
So I don't know what your excuse is, but it's time to start writing road books and put your head down. I mean, and all of this stuff is on a scale of 1 to 10. Like, you're messing around at a 2 or a 3 based on what a Dakar stage is. Yeah. People have told me that, and I'm like, yeah. Well, it's true.
Confirmed.
You take your. I mean, just to transfer. Yeah. Anyway, it's the liaisons are longer than stages in North America.
I remember it was one of the years at Baja Rally. Somebody was complaining about the liaisons being very long, and then somebody else that had been to Dakar and goes, "You have no idea what you're complaining about."
No idea. and I have to say that, like, I chose to be as hard on myself as I could all year, training on my RFR at all these events that my 501 would have been better at. And I'm really glad that I did. But on the liaisons, I was always pretty nice to my RFR. Like, I didn't really ring it out. I mean, it is a single cylinder 450, right? But you go to Saudi Arabia, you rent a bike, the speed limit on the liaisons is 130 kilometers an hour. I think that's close to 81 miles an hour. Mm-hmm. And I mean, I can tell you right now that I'm a lot more comfortable doing 80 on the pavement with a 450 single cylinder than I was when I went. And you're doing it for 500 kilometers, just, like you're just ripping down the road doing 80 miles an hour on a single.
Mm-hmm.
And the bike does it all day long. Like, if Johnson's kind of turned some old RFRs into adventure bikes, and I now realize why it's such a great bike for that. Maybe even better than my 701. My 701 is a lot more comfortable, but the RFR will do it all day long. You talk about supposed to keep your speed under 70 to make the moose survive and all that shit. Well, it doesn't matter. The RFR just eats it up, and the Desert Race tire, the carcass can handle the heat. The Desert Race Baja carcass maybe not, but 80 miles an hour for 500 kilometers, couple P brakes, bike never blinked. I don't really want to be that mean to my bike at home, but it'll do it. And I didn't really know it could do it over and over and over, but it can.
Well, and it was interesting because that's the question. I was like, I'll wait to ask him later in the day, but that was one of the things I was considering. I'm like, well, if there's the chance to purchase a bike, an RFR, right? Is it something that I like bet the farm on, right? Sell the 501, sell the 790, and put an RFR in the garage.
Yeah,
and make that my.
You need to stock spare parts. That's the. So, in my RFR experience in North America, it's not super easy to get parts. So, I now have fuel pumps and a spare set of wheels, and I have, I learned about a couple things that I want to have in stock after Dakar. It's this check valve for the rear tank. You got to have one of those, and you got to have injectors. And so I'm slowly building up the parts that are consumable and do fail. And, if you don't have those around, it can take months to get them from Europe, and they're not really lying around the U.S. I'm pretty sure the KTM parts truck will be at Sonora, or I hope it will be anyway. And, you could probably stock up there and have access to parts if you need it for the race. But that is the one concern about turning it into a proper adventure touring bike is, you're not going to go into the Ace or the KTM shop and XYZ, and they're not going to have that part behind the counter,
So it sounds like, and that was kind of my concern. And then I started thinking, okay, well, then comes you could pretty much buy, because we all know the 450 RFR started life as a 690. And
yes.
So, then you go, okay, well, 701. And
well, that's the thing. I almost dropped everything a couple months ago. So a 690 RFR popped up in Austria for 25,000 euros. And I was like, gosh, that's the bike. That's the bike for, adventure riding in North America. Like it's like my 701, but it's easier to work on and it carries more fuel. I mean, these RFRs are so well thought out, Victor. You can do a motor in like 10 minutes.
That's crazy.
It's 4 bolts. It's a trellis frame. Everything is thought about accessibility. When I want to do something to my 701 LR, like take a gas tank off, it is an ordeal. And the RFR is just made to service, made to work on, and made to take apart, to clean. And that kind of reliability or accessibility, I should say, is dreamy compared to working on my 701. I got somebody who wants my 701, and I'm like, I'd probably just get another RFR, so I have some spare parts lying around.
Just pick another one up. I mean, it's tough for me because that's the, like, I hate to say, but it's like, I think with that being said, it's almost, I'm like, I think a 701 would be the, I could ditch the 501, I could ditch the 790, and then that's the one, the one bike. Because right now it's split between the two. I mean, the 501 is light enough to be able to ride it anywhere, do whatever with it. And the 790 is good because, hey, if I want to jump on the highway for 100 miles, or commute to work on it, it'll do it. It's happy doing whatever. I don't know.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, there's an RFR in Switzerland for sale for 21,000 euros, and it's never done Dakar. It's got 103 hours on it. And then there's a Dakar in England. I'm sorry. There's an RFR in England for sale for 31,000 euros that only has 23 or 32 hours on it. Never done Dakar. I mean, they're out there.
Yeah.
Getting into the States is a whole nother
ball game
conversation. But I don't know. Hopefully we see more of them. I took this video of all the RFRs at the finish of the race and the shipping crates. And I mean, when you see 100 of them, you're just like, that's a lot of money. Like I'll send it to you. It's funny.
Crazy.
And it's funny. There was one guy there on a 450cc Husqvarna FE 450. And, like my rally bike RFR looks pretty out of place at Sonora or Baja Rally. Like it's the ugly duck, not the ugly duckling, but it's out of place. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And over there, there's just so many RFRs that when you see a proper enduro bike, you're like, wow, that looks weird. Just the roles reversed.
It's funny. I have the Dakar website up in the background, and they have this scrolling picture thing at the top with the highlights and whatnot. And there's a picture of the original class, like the Motul pit area for you guys for the Malamoto thing. And I can see that. See that bike.
Oh yeah, it's a white one. He's got the rear. He's got that rear Italian gas tank on it, and I'm pretty sure he made it to the finish line with that thing. It didn't want to start every day, but he made it to the finish line. And
nice.
Anyway, I've got a lot of people to thank, and I probably will forget most of them if I start on some of them. But everybody who helped, thank you, and all the companies that helped ARO, thank you, and all the people who cheered for me and bought a T-shirt and got some stickers and stuff. I can't thank you enough. And that kind of support gets somebody like me through something like that. So more mentally than anything. So appreciate everybody. And I'd love to start rattling names and things off, but I'll insult somebody by forgetting. You all know who you are.
Yeah. No. But yeah, and I appreciate you taking the time and hanging out and talking and sharing your adventure. I mean, that's awesome. I
appreciate you, Victor, and look forward to doing some road books together. That sounds good. I'm glad you're ponying up, and thanks for making it public knowledge, because now everybody else is going to encourage you too.
Yeah, I think I might have just started a chain reaction.
Yeah, good one. Good.
But I appreciate it, and Mo, one more time, man, congratulations.
I appreciate that, Victor. Thanks for everything, and I appreciate it more than you know. So thanks.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Thank you. And we'll see you soon.
All right.
All right, bud. See ya.
Bye.
Bye. All right. There you have it. Number 105 in the 2023 Dakar in the Originals by Motul class and Dakar Finisher Mo Hart. That was awesome. I mean, so many little things. And I mean, and there's more. I mean, this is going to be like the conversation for the next year or more. And there's going to be, every time that conversation comes up, there's going to be something new and different about it. So I'm absolutely excited to spend some time in the bivouac with these guys and talk a little bit more about it and bring you guys some of the adventures. So with that being said, guys, remember, it'll make sense when you get there. Enjoy the ride. All right, that is a wrap for the Chasing Waypoints podcast this week. Hope you guys enjoyed the show. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you like what you heard. We are available on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and a bunch of others. Also, follow us on social media. You can find us on Facebook under Chasing Waypoints, Instagram, Chasing Waypoints _official, and, of course, the YouTube under Chasing Waypoints. Hope everybody has a good week. We will see you guys for the next episode. Remember, shiny side up, and don't forget to tag us. We want to see where you guys are riding and what you guys are up to. Have a great week.